Everybody, I am really thrilled to be back. My name is Eric Edmeades, for those of you that are new that maybe weren't with us yesterday. And we are now on day 2 of our live taping of the, it's so weird. We used to call it filming, and then it's not film anymore. And then we called it taping, but it's not tape anymore. I don't know what to call it anymore. But our live recording of the Business Freedom Foundations program. And so for those of you that were not with us yesterday, or maybe haven't had a chance to watch the replay, what we're doing is we're recording a training program called Business Freedom Foundations, which is all about how to either set up a new business, preparing it for business freedom, or how to transition an existing business so that it has a solid foundation for business freedom. And the reason we do this is that I found going into a studio and just recording for soulless cameras was just not so very much fun for me. I'd come to the end of the day and I'd just be shattered for energy. And so we've a couple times now tried this experiment where we just invite a live studio audience, although not live with us, although we should do that, Kelsey. We should have a live audience as well. That would be really fun. Maybe tomorrow here in Phoenix, we can fill up a few. I'm kidding. We'll do it another time. But the point is that having people participating directly with us really changed the whole energy for me. It helped us improve the product, and it's just been fantastic. So that's why you're here. And so let me just recap briefly what we have done, what we did yesterday, and then I'm going to jump into a bunch of the questions that we didn't get to yesterday and that queued up overnight. So, and by the way, I just want to tell you guys, I'm really impressed by your commitment. And what I mean by that is that yesterday there was never a moment where there weren't at least 400 people from probably 15 countries around the world that were watching. And we can tell the engagement from the type of questions we're getting from people in the comments, and when you guys are answering my questions back and forth when we do a little bit of a poll and stuff. I have to tell you, thank you so very much for that. And yesterday was just scratching the surface. Yesterday was kind of laying a little bit of a foundation for the foundation. Today, we're going to start to get really deep into the process of how you really create the blueprint for total business freedom. We had to do everything we had to do yesterday to get ready for today. Today is going to be powerful stuff. So what did we do yesterday? Well, yesterday, we talked about what business freedom is. We talked about the harsh reality of entrepreneurship, that frankly, you have to be just about a hopeless optimist to become an entrepreneur, because would you make that bet on the stock market if somebody came along and told you that there's this great stock you should invest in and 80% of the time it fails within 5 years? I don't think you'd have made that bet. And so to become an entrepreneur is a very optimistic thought process. And most people do it because they believe that being an entrepreneur is going to give them control over their destiny. They believe that it's going to give them increased personal liberty and increased financial abundance. And then the reality sinks in. The reality is that they've gone from having a job to having multiple jobs, and having a little bit of responsibility to having all of the responsibility. And frankly, for the 1 of 5 that does make it, for that 20% that does make it out through the 5th year, they do it through brute force, hard work, stress, and sacrifice. They don't do it in the way it should be done often. And that is this, that as your business grows, you should have more freedom. And your business should continue to grow until the point in time when you've decided you want ultimate freedom, and that is that you don't have to go there anymore, or that maybe you even want to sell it or exit in some way. And so that's really what business freedom is all about. And then we talked about the fact that there are 2 kinds of business freedom. There's complete business freedom, and that is where you own a company that just has no requirement for you. That maybe you look at your monthly or quarterly financial reports, and that's the extent of your contribution. No different than looking at your stock portfolio. The company runs, it's smooth, it's organic, it grows, it generates profits, and it pays you to simply be the owner. Fabulous type of business freedom. And then the second type of business freedom is type 2, which is business freedom built around a passion. And that means that you've got a real passion for something. You really enjoy doing it a great deal. And so you don't necessarily want type 1 business freedom, because you still want to do what you're doing. That said, a lot of people say that to me, and I'm like, well, wait a second. What happens if you do want to take a long extended vacation with your family? Let's say you want to take a big staycation for 3 months around the South Pacific. Then you have no income because your business is built around you and your passion. Or God forbid something happens to you or your family, and then you don't have a business. Whereas if you have type 2 business freedom, what you've done is you've built a business that, first of all, allows you to spend the majority of your time following your passion. Rather than, like many people that have passion-based businesses, they get to work on their passion for a few nuggets of the day, and the rest of the time they're doing administration, and they're taking out the trash, and they're doing the hiring, and they're doing their accounts. No. The first phase in type 2 business freedom is where you get to a place where, first 80, 90, maybe even 100% of your time is doing stuff that you really love. And then moving to the next level where it's like, hey, I can do what I love to do here, but I don't have to. The business would continue to operate irrespective of my contribution. That is ultimate business freedom. In other words, it means that your business can run entirely without you, but you can show up and deliver your art, deliver your passion as much as or as little as you want. So we talked about that yesterday. We ran a bit of a poll. We ran a poll asking you guys yesterday, like, which type of business freedom are you most interested in? And it looks like type 2 was kind of in the lead and followed by both. And I love the answer both because, frankly, once somebody has type 1 business freedom, they very often start the next business. And then they develop type 1 business freedom in that business. And then they build the next business. And that's where you get into true serial entrepreneurship, when people can own multiple businesses at the same time and still have time for their family and their health and their vacations and every other passion that they have. So that's the introduction we did to business freedom. Then in the next module, we talked about why you want to have business freedom. And we talked about the personal reasons, the reasons for you, your body, your health, your psychology, your desire to travel the world, whatever it is that would improve life for you. We talked about that. Then we said, wait a minute now, how would it impact your family to have business freedom? I think this is a very big thing to consider. Whether you've got a family now or whether you're planning to have one, let's be very clear that if we are sacrificing time with our family for the business, there's an issue there. Now, I'm all for recognizing that we might have multiple passions, and you might be very passionate about your business like I am. I end up spending time away from my family at times, but more and more, it's a matter of me choosing my schedule and choosing when to be home and when to not be home. I watch entrepreneurs all over the world, and they don't have that choice. In fact, I see business owners that are going to work early, really early, often shortly after their kids have woken. They barely get to have breakfast with them. And then they work all day. And then they work a little into the evening. Then they come home basically just in time to have a tired dinner with their family. And then dinner's over, and then they're opening up the laptop and picking up and doing a little bit more work. Just a little work, honey, just a little. And, you know, I heard Esther Perel say this so beautifully the other day. I think the way she put it is, when you get home, are you the gourmet meal for your family, or is your family just getting the leftovers? Interesting distinction. And so we talked about the impact of business freedom on your family, and then we talked about the impact of business freedom on your community. And then we went one step further on maybe a global level, and here's why we did that. Because what I've really observed around the world is that the kind of people who are driven to be self-directed, the kind of people who don't make very good employees, the kind of people who are here to create personal liberty for themselves, those kinds of people are also excellent problem solvers. And generally speaking, if you can get them to be bored and then show them interesting problems, they will solve them. And maybe some of the problems that you could solve around the world, you collectively, us collectively, could be things like, you know, world hunger. How about poverty? How about the incredible socioeconomic divisions we have in the world? How about conservation? How about all the animals that we're pushing through to extinction? I mean, do you think it's okay that we kill an elephant every 15 minutes just so we can take its tusks and make a new piano? I don't think so. But the fact is that if entrepreneurs are so busy solving problems in their business, then they don't have the mental capacity or the time or the money, for that matter, to go out and solve the world's problems. But the joke is, the problems that they're solving in their business are problems that have already been solved for the most part. They've been solved by other entrepreneurs. And so when we begin to learn that we don't have to solve every problem originally, that we can get good mentors and we can develop good mastermind teams and we can have excellent peers around us, then what's really fascinating is that you find that business freedom is so much easier than you might think it is. And I pray for the day that you're bored. I do. I pray for the day that you're bored, that you show up for work. I remember the day, the first time it happened to me. I walked into my office. It was so funny. Walked into my office and I had a desk planner, and my assistant, she would always set out my desk planner for me. So it would show me all the appointments I had for that day, any of the projects that I had to work on. And it was all nicely laid out with time allocated and so on. I sat down and she hadn't done it. So I had to go and talk to her. I was like, excuse me, where are my things? What's going on? And she goes, you don't have any. I say, excuse me? She goes, you don't have any. You don't have any appointments today. And you don't have any projects. You don't have any things you have to do. Everything's being handled. I was blown away. And I pray for that day for you. And I know that for some of you, that day is in sight. Some of you, you know that day is coming for you. You know that. Some of you, that day was coming irrespective of coming and doing this program, and maybe now it'll come a little sooner. Some of you, though, you look at that day and it's a bridge too far. It's like me the very first time standing at the base of Kilimanjaro. I've climbed that mountain 7 times. The very first time I stood there looking up to the base, I thought, there's no way. It's just too far. It's just too high. In fact, little funny sidebar is that I'd been training with my friends Jason and Lee in England, and we went off to Wales to climb some of the mountains in Wales so we could train for Kilimanjaro, these big mountains. Well, we got to Africa and we're driving along. We went to go on safari first, and as we're driving along to the safari, we drive past the mountain, and it's huge. It's making those things in Wales look like pimples. I mean, they barely exist compared to this thing. And all of a sudden, the 4 of us are talking all about how big this mountain is. And then the big Tanzanian driver, he's sitting there, he's got his Rasta hat on, and he listens to us with his talking about how big this mountain is and how maybe we've taken on something too big. And he turns around and he goes, "Whoa, that's not Kilimanjaro. That's Mount Meru, the little brother." It was a huge mountain. When we finally saw Kilimanjaro, we're like, what are we thinking? And for some of you, the idea of showing up at your office and not being needed, having an organic company that is organic, that has a life of its own, is a bridge too far. But I want you to know it is absolutely possible. It is absolutely doable. I've done it more than once, and I've helped many other people do it. And so I want you to know that it's there for you. And then I want you to think about that. We talked about this yesterday. If that was the case for you, what would be next? Would you start another business? Would you take on a social project? And that's why we talk about all the different reasons. Why is business and freedom important to you personally? Why do you think it might be important to your family? Why do you think it's important to your community? And what might it even do globally? And then after that, we talked about the first part of setting the foundation, and we created a role map. We talked about the principle of creating an organizational chart that's based around the roles and not based around the people. And then you guys had your homework assignment and you got that done. So that's where we left off yesterday. So before we jump into the second part of role maps, or module 4, where we talk about role map diagnostics, we're going to take some of the questions that we didn't get to yesterday and that queued up overnight. So I am ready whenever you are. Excellent. So this question is from Gerard Garcia Diaz. Okay, so hi, Eric. It's the Star Wars t-shirt guy from Thailand. I remember. I have my very own business idea, but I also love my current job in the solar energy sector, trying to save the world. How do I handle this myself? Can I multitask, or will that burn both goals and myself? Wow, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure I can even answer it for you properly without really sitting down and kind of figuring out what's going on. What I mean is that these days, there's so much distraction out there in the world. And the one thing that really holds a lot of entrepreneurs up is that they try to do multiple things at once. Even in my case, some of you will be familiar that I have my company WildFit, and then I also have the Business Freedom Academy. And it's working very well for us. And what we have to be very careful of is we have to be very careful of making sure that I allocate time reasonably to both businesses while we're growing them, because I don't have business freedom from either one of them yet. They're new, right? And they're passion businesses, so I'm going after type 2 business freedom, which means they're still going to involve me. But then the other thing that we have to remember is what that creates in terms of my branding, or what it creates in terms of the impression it makes on the market. So one thing we're really clear about is whenever we launch in a new country, we only launch one of the businesses in the new country. We either launch WildFit or we launch Business Freedom until that brand has been established in the country, and then we bring the second brand in. In your case, the question I would really have is, how much focus does your job in the solar company take? And do you have the capacity for taking on a very serious hobby, which would be your second business? And if you can do that, then I think it could be fabulous. You're young, you've got a lot of energy, and I think that could be a really great way to do it. I did this once. In fact, in my very first job at around about 1994, I decided to start a second business, and that business was publishing an online magazine called the Success Express Journal. It was the internet's very first internet email-based personal development magazine. It was, bear in mind, in 1994, not very many people had email, so I was a bit early in the game. But I will tell you that by 96, 97, we were at the place where we had 70,000 subscribers in 70 countries around the world. It was absolutely incredible. Actually, somebody pointed out to me the other day that the journals, many of them are actually archived somewhere on the internet. So if you search, Eric Edmeades plus the journal, or Success Express journal or something like that, you might find it. But here was the kicker. I had a job that I was so good at, that I'd so handled, I was in sales, that I had such good loyal clients that I really had the extra time and mental capacity to publish a magazine. I absolutely did. And so I did that for years. And in fact, it helped my job. Because think about it, every single week I was publishing a magazine about business and personal development. And every single issue had a book review or a seminar review in it. So that meant that I was putting myself through this crash course in everything written by Wayne Dyer and Stephen Covey and Michael Gerber and Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn and all these other people. So it was actually helping my other job. But then there came a day where I had to quit that job. And when I quit that job and got ready to start my next business, I realized I did not have the bandwidth to start the new business and keep the magazine going. I had to make a tough decision. And bear in mind, you might think today, wow, 70,000 subscribers in 70 countries. Obviously, you could build a massive internet, business out of that. But the problem was that in 1995, 1996, 1997, there were no ways to collect money online. There was no way to do it. Not even Amazon didn't even have an affiliate program yet. So there was no way for us to take that list and take that magazine and turn it into a viable business. Had I been able to hang on for another 4 or 5 years, we could have turned it into a hugely massive business. But so I was faced with a decision: start my new company or keep the magazine going. And I couldn't do both. So in your case, it may well be that you were in the situation that I was in. You've got a great job, you love it, you're good at it, and you've got time to put into another business as a hobby. In which case, I would say go for it. But I would also suggest to you that the capacity to focus 100% on one thing is incredibly valuable. And so it may well be that you should have a real serious think about the difference between focusing 100% on your job in the solar business, in the energy sector, or focusing 100% on your business. And where might that take you? And what I would suggest to you is don't simply look at what that means over the next month or 2 or 3, because if you only look at the next month or 2 or 3, then you're probably just going to stay in your job no matter what. But if you look at year 3 and year 5, you might take a different view of having your own business. And so that taking that long view on decisions can be really, really helpful. Great question. Thanks very much. Good morning to you. And good to hear from you all the way from Tallinn. Julia, also from Estonia. It's like Estonia Day over here. Julia from Estonia. I have a business with my partner. He is more of a numbers person, and I sometimes feel like he is only in the numbers and says no to most creative ideas. No, we can't afford it. It's not possible, etc. What's a better way to deliver ideas to that kind of person, especially if you can't show him numbers? How do you make him interested? Oh, Julia. All right. So Julia, there's a couple of things. It may be that not only is he a numbers person, but he might also be an opposite polarity communicator. What that means is he might be one of those people that's always able to see the opposite. You've been around people like this before. You go, wow, isn't it a beautiful day today? And they go, yeah, but it's a bit hot, right? You know what I'm talking about? Oh, that movie was really, really fun. Yeah, it was, but it was long, right? They always have an opposite view. So here's the first little thing that I want to suggest to you is the next time you go and talk to your partner, what I want you to try is to, and I hope your partner's not watching right now, I really do, but here's what I want you to try. I want you to go to your partner and say, hey, you probably won't agree with this idea, but. Or you can say, hey, this is probably a bad idea, but I wanted to run it past you anyway. This may sound like a really subtle thing, but I will tell you that it's extremely effective sometimes with the right people. Because there are some people who are just built to see the other side. They're not negative. They're not wrong. They're very valuable in society. I would put to you that Thomas Edison was one of these people. That these people are often not willing to accept the socially accepted realities and say, no, I'm looking at the opposite side. So they're very valuable. They also, however, can be quite frustrating to speak to. When you begin to realize that one of the things they simply need to do is disagree with the first statement, then give them something they can disagree with. In other words, look, this is probably a really bad idea, but, and then give them the idea. Well, what you might find is they end up disagreeing with your first statement. No, that's not a bad idea. I know this may sound overly simplistic for you, but I will tell you, a few years ago, I described this to a very good friend of mine, Gavin Wilding. He's a film producer based out of Vancouver. And I told him about it, and he's like, whatever, that just sounds too silly. And then he and I were sitting in a meeting in San Rafael, California. And there was a guy named Richard at the meeting. And Richard, he's not a very nice guy. There's a word that I might use if I wasn't broadcasting live around the world to describe our impression of him. He was drinking far too much wine, and he didn't have a very nice personality. And maybe it was just that night, but he was difficult, very difficult. And he was disagreeing with every single idea that we came up with. And then finally, Gavin, he gave me a little bit of an elbow, and he's like, hey, he's doing that opposite polarity thing. He's mismatching everything you say. Do your thing. And I'm like, oh man, I don't really want to do it. So he's like, come on, do it. So all night, Richard has been shooting down every idea that anybody comes up with, like 100%. And then I just, I'm eating my food and I go, hey, this is probably a really bad idea, but what if we do this? And I kid you not, Richard went, oh, no, that's a really good idea. Gavin lost it. He started laughing, but like trying to control it. And then I did another one. And I said, okay, but I'm probably wrong about this, but what if we tried that? And Richard goes, no, you're not wrong. We should try that. All of a sudden, I got Richard to agree to 3 things in a row. Gavin had to leave the room. He was laughing so hard. Richard had no idea what he was laughing about. He had tears on his face. He had to leave the room. It was so uncomfortable. And so, Julia, if this sounds overly simplistic to you, I want you to give it a try. Now, let's talk about numbers. The fact is that it's extremely valuable to have a partner that's very creative and a partner that's very number-oriented. It's extremely valuable to have a partner that wants to fly high and another partner that wants to hold the string and keep you grounded. That's extremely valuable. The challenge is making sure that the power doesn't sit too strongly with one or with the other. There has to be power exchange. So when you're communicating with your partner, I think that there's a couple things to remember. The one is that very often numbers people are all about certainty. They're all about certainty. So in the end, when they're saying, no, we can't afford it. What they're really saying is, no, I don't think it's a good bet. That's what they're often saying. Because often you might have the money, but they're saying, I don't really want us to put the money on that. We can't afford it. We can't afford it doesn't mean we can't afford it most of the time. Generally speaking, when somebody says, I can't afford it, what it really means is I don't see the value yet. That's the truth of it. Whatever you're selling. I know people come up to me at our live events and they're coming along, they're going, oh, I want to come to your workshop and here's how much it is. It's not cheap. They go, oh, I can't afford it. I know at that moment that it's not a matter of they can't afford it. I know that if their car broke down and they suddenly had to find, $5,000 to fix their car, they'd figure it out. It's not that they can't afford it. It's that they don't see the value proposition yet, or they think the risk is too high. So one of your jobs, Julia, is to put the presentation together, recognizing your partner's need for certainty. And so while you can't show him numbers, you can show him numbers. What I mean is you can show him projections. You can say, look, I've done some research. If we invest this much here, we're going to create that, and I think it'll generate this many sales. And in the low case, I think it'll create this return, which means we'll have our money back in 9 months. But in the best return, I think we could have our money back with pre-orders within about 3 weeks. I'm making that up, obviously, Julia, but you get the point, is that you need to go in there with some certainty about where the plan is going. If you go to your partner and you say, I have this idea, and I wonder if we should take 15,000 euros and, to go to Las Vegas with it. Okay, probably that's not the best idea, right? But the point is that if that's your physiology, if you're weak in the messaging, then absolutely it's going to go, no, we can't afford that. We can't do that. But if you walk up and say, okay, I think this is a game changer. I've got an idea here, and I've done some projections. He'll love that word. He'll love that word. I've done some projections. And so I just want to show you the projections so we can evaluate this idea and decide whether we should move with it or let it go. All right, Julia? I hope you have fun with that. Let me know how it works out. I'll be in Thailand, as you know, in July, so you can tell me the rest of the story then. Allison, any kick in the pants advice for those of us who are new to building their own business and terrified of leaving the perceived security of the corporate world? I found my passion, but I'm holding myself back due to my responsibility to my family. I'm working part-time to start. Okay, Allison, I want to be careful in how I say this because I'm not one of these people. I don't know if you know the whole burn the boats idea, but the idea is that, the boats arrive on the beach on the island, then they're invading, and then the captain says, burn all the boats. What do you mean burn the boats? They go, because if we don't win this, we're not going home. And I'm not really that big a fan of that. I think there's a time and a place for it. If you ever want to hear a really great story about that, I suggest listening to Tony Robbins telling the story of Sylvester Stallone. It is a truly amazing story. And little highlights are that he was so poor that he had to sell his dog because he needed the money to feed himself. He didn't even have money to feed his dog. And of course, at one point, Tony says to him, well, if you were that poor, why didn't you just go and get a job? And he said, because I didn't want to take away my hunger. And I'm paraphrasing here, but there's something powerful in the decision to move forward and to cut off the other alternative. There's something very powerful in that. That said, what I want to balance that against, I don't know what your situation is, and I don't know what other incomes your family has, and I don't know what your responsibilities your family are. So I'm not recommending burning the boats. I'm just pointing out that it can be a very powerful thing. I also want to say this to you. I'm really glad, Allison, that you said perceived security of the corporate world. I'm really glad that you said perceived security of the corporate world, because it is perceived and it isn't any more secure in many ways. And what I mean is that if you really think about it, every single person on earth is an entrepreneur. Every single person on earth has a business. It's just that many people's business is to sell their time. That's their business, is to sell their time. When they lose one job, they go out and they go get another customer and sell their time to that customer. That's their business. And so the challenge, of course, with that is any business owner will tell you that it is extremely dangerous to have only one product, because some competitor might come along or some technological change or some change in legislation. And if you only have one product, you could be in some danger. And then the other big danger in business is having only one client. No entrepreneur is happy with that. That is not, I woke up at about, I want to say day or week, around about I want to say in the first quarter of the second year I was in business with my first company, and I did an evaluation and realized that about 70% of my business was coming from one customer. It scared the hell out of me because I suddenly realized we could go out of business if that one customer went out of business, or if they switched to a competitor, or God knows what might happen. And so I immediately sought to change that. And I did. And we were never in that situation ever again. Think about it. As an employee, that means that someone has one product, their time, and one customer, their employer. That's a pretty risky proposition. And the first time I noticed this is when I spotted something that we now in our workshops call a business iceberg. And a business iceberg is some danger that's looming out there in the fog. You can't really see it because of the fog of busyness. And of course, a lot of it is below the surface anyway. So unless you're really looking for them, you don't see these icebergs. And the very first time I saw an iceberg, I was 18 years old, and I was growing up in Halifax, Nova Scotia in Eastern Canada. And at that point, my favorite band was Aerosmith. And Aerosmith had just gotten back together. They'd been broken up for a few years, and they released an album called Permanent Vacation. The name of the album spoke to my very soul. I had to go get it. And so I went to the record store to go get this album. And you know what I saw in that record store in 1988 for the first time? I saw these little silver discs with rainbow patterns on them. I had no idea what they were. I asked the salesperson. He explained that they were called compact discs, and they were the new way of having music. And I looked at these things, and they looked so delicate. And I was like, no way. I mean, even if record albums were that small, you would never get me, even if you could stick one into the dash of your car, it would get scratched. I looked at them and thought they were pointless. And I bought my album and I went home and listened to it. Over the next 6 months, compact discs would do something that everybody thought was impossible. Because you see, 8-track tapes did not destroy the vinyl record industry. Everybody thought they were going to. When 8-track tapes came out, it was like, oh, people won't buy records anymore. And it didn't. And then cassette tapes came out. Cassette tapes, like the little ones, if there's any millennials here, don't worry, I'm moving on to topics that you'll understand again soon. But cassette tapes, like the kind that you used to put in your car after 8-track tapes, like everybody thought when they came out, well, record albums didn't disappear again. So once again, when the compact disc came along, nobody thought that this would be a problem for record albums. Only over the next 6 months, the vinyl industry was completely destroyed. I mean, completely destroyed. Oh, yes, it's true. There's a bit of a fad today where you can go out and buy vinyl records. I mean, yeah, but it's like hobby collecting. It's like collecting stamps. It's not a real thing. And what I'm saying is in that moment at 18 years old, I looked at the world and I realized there was no such thing as job security if you only had one employer. Because suddenly some technological change could happen in an entire industry, never mind an entire business, never mind just a job or a department, an entire industry was wiped out. And so what I would say to you is that your language, perceived security, is absolutely valid. And so if I can, if I can inspire you at all to figure out what your path is to being self-directed and to having your own business, I really would love to inspire you to do that. If you need to do it more cautiously and not burn the boats, I support that. If you think you're the kind of person that needs to make a big decision and burn the boats, then I support that too. Allison, thank you so much. Very thought-provoking. Great question. Thank you. All right, next question from Julie Brown. Julie, if it's the Julie I think you are, hello. Well, either way, hello, Julie, but I think I know this Julie. Julie, it's nice to have you here. What matters more? Mindset or technical and financial reality when transitioning from one income source like a regular job to your own business? I struggle with blocking off more time for my coaching business versus my regular job. I have flexibility as a contract teacher, but I find it difficult to say no to the reliability of my job and regular income. I'm in the foundation stage of business building where income isn't great, but there are many time-consuming details. Okay, Julie, so there's a couple things. First of all, the entire rant that I just did probably answers some of your question. My conversation with Allison is probably helpful to you. That said, if you're a contract teacher, you don't probably have only one client. And maybe in a way you do, the school board or whatever, however that works for you are. But equally, there's multiple schools. So maybe it's not quite as risky as normal employment, but the message is still very much the same. Now, that said, your real original question is, what matters more, mindset or technical and financial reality? And what I would say to you is that mindset matters far more than technical and mindset reality. Way more. Like infinitely more. And I'll prove it to you. Because isn't it true that we have an entire group of people around the world that suddenly find themselves richer than they were comfortable with? I'm talking about lottery winners here. Now, years ago, I said this crazy thing on stage one day, and it just kind of stuck with me. But I said this. I said, in order to become a millionaire, you have to do it twice. You have to do it first in your mind. You have to start thinking and vibrating and being like a millionaire in your mind. And then you can become a millionaire in your bank account, in your business, in your investments. The trouble for many lottery winners is that they become a millionaire before they become a millionaire in their mind. And so as a consequence, many of them end up losing all of the money, losing all of their friends, and ending up more broke after winning a lottery than before. This became such a big problem that in the United Kingdom, Camelot, who runs the lottery companies, as I understand it, ended up putting together an entire program for lottery winners that had coaching and financial advisors and all this kind of stuff. Because what was happening is there were so many stories in the press of people that would win the lottery and then end up broke and committing suicide and ending up in jail, that people were no longer buying lottery tickets because they began to see the reality. And the reality is that a quantum leap financially without a quantum leap in your mindset is dangerous. It's actually dangerous. And so I would say to you that mindset is significantly more important than financial reality. In fact, I would say that there's not a chicken and egg debate there at all, that mindset should come first. And if it doesn't, that could be a problem. Julie, you've probably heard me say this before, but I want you to think about this. You often hear motivational speakers, inspirational speakers, and gurus and stuff, and they say, hey, have you ever had that situation where you go buy a car or you're thinking about buying a car and then suddenly that car is everywhere? How many people have had that experience? My question is, why didn't you see the car before? Now, that's the way most speakers use that story, and I would say it's wrong because I want to tell you, you did see the car before. You did. You didn't see it for what it was, but you absolutely saw it because if you couldn't see that car before, you would have tried to park in the same spot that it was parked. Or you would have tried to walk across the street in front of it, or you would have tried to change lanes into the lane that it was in. You absolutely could see the car before, but you saw it as a car. Not as a Jeep Wrangler or a Mazda MX-5 or whatever car you're interested in that activated you to pay attention to the make of the car. This is an important mindset adjustment. Recognizing, for example, that there are opportunities around us all the time, but we often can't see them in the same way we couldn't see the cars before. In other words, we do see them, we just don't recognize them. And so mindset plays an incredibly important part in this. It's a very, very valuable part. And so I don't think it would be appropriate for me to give you that answer without maybe giving you a bit of a tip in terms of how to improve your mindset. Here's one of them. I want you to recognize that we have some stereotypes in our society, and they're self-perpetuating stereotypes designed, not even designed, they just end up making wealth seem dirty in some way. And I'll prove it to you by saying this. And I want everybody to answer me on this. Let's all together write a screenplay, okay? Imagine we're gonna make a movie, and I already know who the characters are. We've got one character. He's a Palo Alto.com billionaire who developed the most incredible operating system, and his operating system's all over the world. And then we have the other guy who's a starving student who's struggling to get by. Now, I haven't figured out which one is going to be the good guy and which one is going to be the bad guy. So could you tell me who is going to be the bad guy? Everybody, I want to know, who's the bad guy? Do we have answers?
Rich, woke, millionaire, rich one, student.
Student people, you know you're not right. The people who are writing the rich guy, that's the answer today. And those of you who are writing student, I'm going to guess you either know where I'm going with this or you've seen me do this talk before. But the point is that in our society, it has to be the rich guy that's the bad guy. It just has to be that way. And it has to be the student who's the good guy. It just is that way. In fact, if we take that student and we kill his parents, he can even be a superhero because all superheroes are orphans. We like our stories to be formulaic like this. The problem with this is that the more stories we make like that, the more we perpetuate that myth, and the more we perpetuate that myth, the more society wants more stories like that. So in other words, I don't think that the Illuminati or the Rothschilds or the Gateses or any of these people are intentionally making movies to make us feel bad about money. What I'm saying is that today, if you want a lot of people to buy tickets to your movie, you got to make the bad guy rich. You got to make the good guy poor, because that way the majority of people who regard themselves as not rich will be able to associate with the good guy. So you got to make the movie that way or else they won't go. But then if you keep making the movie like that, you keep perpetuating the myth, and you got to make another movie like that. And so pretty soon you begin to understand why it is that people have beliefs like rich people are evil. And I will tell you, there are definitely evil rich people. But I would tell you that there are a lot of evil poor people too. And it's just the way it is. And so, Julie, one of the big adjustments you can make in your mindset relative to money and relative to your security around money is to simply smirk. Here's what I mean. Every single time for the next week or two that you are watching a movie, or that you see an advertisement, or you see a headline in the newspaper, and you can see that there's vilification of wealth going on, just smirk at it. Just realize that it's an undercoating in our society, and it's wrong. It's not right at all. It's simply right because democracy has flaws. And one of the flaws in democracy is if the majority of people are below the poverty line, then the majority of people are going to buy the movie tickets, and that's going to drive the way books are written and movies are written and TV shows are made. And so if you can, the next time you go to a movie and you notice, oh, look at that, they vilified the rich guy, smirk at it. The next time you see them glorifying poverty, smirk at that. And I'm telling you, you do that even just for a week or two, and it will begin to shift the way you look at the world. One last note on this, Julie. You've probably heard the expression that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And what I want to put to you is that I don't think that that expression is exactly correct either. What I would put to you is that when the student becomes ready, the student will realize the teacher was always already there, because the teacher is any circumstance that's sitting around them all the time that they could not yet see for what it was. Julie, thank you very much. Super thought-provoking, a little deeper than I had planned to go today, but a lot of fun. What about Batman and Iron Man? Yeah, they're rich, but guess what? They don't have any superpowers. Think about that. Batman, Iron Man, and Green Arrow. They are the three rich superheroes. They have no superpowers because rich people buy their privileges. Oh, and by the way, neither of them are good. None of the three of them are even good guys. I mean, they become good guys in the end. But Batman, with that dark, vigilante, bat-dreaming soul, and Green Arrow and Iron Man, they're both drug-abusing, alcohol-abusing, women-abusing, misogynistic jerks. They have to be bad guys. Can you imagine Superman saying any of the lines that Iron Man ever says? Never in a million years. Superman is virtuous because he's just a lowly reporter at the Daily Planet. No. Thank you for asking that question because we got to go deeper. All right, next question. Tradian Meyer. Eric, if you were given 100K and you would have to start a type 1 business in the first quarter of this year, what would that business be? I think that question would be a lot easier for me to answer if I didn't have 100K, if I didn't have money in the bank and I didn't have businesses. I mean, if I was, maybe it would be, I really don't know the answer. I think that first of all, you want the answer because maybe you're thinking that it might give you an idea of some trend that I've observed or what have you. But I would tell you that the first thing that if I were having to do that, let's say, for example, beginning of 2018, I decided to completely start all over and I couldn't be in the businesses I was in now, and I simply had 100K. Now, to try and create your question in a more real terms for me, then you need to know that the very first thing that I would be looking at is it fun? That's the very first thing that I'd be looking at is the business opportunities that are out there in front of me. Will they be fun? Will they be enjoyable? Will they be entertaining? This is a big thing that I've learned. You might remember yesterday I talked a little bit about my whole metaphor of how the summer, as the summer goes, children develop a different appreciation for time. The days in June and July are long and luscious and delicious, and then the days in July are like short and scarce, and by the end of August they're really short and scarce. Well, one of the things that I found in the last few years of my life is that I am not willing to sacrifice my present for my future the way I was as a kid. And so as I look to evaluate business opportunities, and this is exactly how I still look at things today. Somebody comes along and says to me, "Hey, Eric, can you come and do private consulting for me or private coaching?" I rarely take jobs like that on. I rarely do. But what's funny is the odd time I've done it, it's the people who've understood me really well, and they've come up to me and go, "Eric, we've got this really fun business. Could you come and help us with it?" And they've got my attention at that point. It doesn't mean they'll win me over, but at least they'll have my attention. The mistake a lot of people make is they come along and they go, "Eric, we have huge, we can get you a huge return on investment." Yeah, I mean, that's great and all, but money's not my biggest mystery in the world, right? I'm more interested in whether or not I'm going to have fun. And then secondarily, I'm more interested in the social impact of what that business is going to be. So if you look at my two core businesses today, and I've got other business interests, but if you look at my two core focuses today around the Business Freedom Academy, I think by now, if you've been here for the last 2 days, and if you've known me before, which I think you have, I recognize you, then you'll know that that what's happening in this business is, first of all, I'm having a huge amount of fun. I mean, I love what I get to do. For those of you who have never been to one of our live workshops, if you think this is fun, come to a live workshop. It's another thing entirely. I have a ton of fun. Everybody does. But then the second thing is that it has a huge social footprint. We are having a massive impact on the lives of entrepreneurs around the world, which has a spill-on effect on their families and on their communities and so on. So it has social power. On the other side, if you look at my company, WildFit, what could be more valuable than returning people to health? I mean, not a day goes by that I don't get a message from somebody that says that they've lost all the weight that they've been trying to lose since they had their baby or since they were in school, or that their inflammation is gone, that they no longer have arthritic pain, that their doctor just took them off their blood pressure medication. I mean, every single day we get those. And so first of all, I have a ton of fun. And secondly, it has social impact. So I think if I were looking to answer your question, you need to know that those would be the primary criteria that I'd be paying attention to. Now, that said, I think that if I today were going to be starting a brand new business, a really brand new business, I think that I would be definitely looking at, in my world with my skill set, I would definitely be looking at information products that I was able to deliver in live environments and online. So irrespective of what I do with Business Freedom and WildFit, I would still want to do that. I still want to do that because it meets my sense of fun. I really enjoy performing. I like giving. I have a generous spirit that I really love giving my energy. I love solving problems for people. My wife is always joking that I just walk around and do free consulting all the time because we sit down and have lunch with friends and immediately they're like, "Hey, I have this problem with my business. I just can't stop. I love doing it." And so if I couldn't do it in the areas that I was doing it in now, I would likely start another business that had to do with imparting valuable information to people that I would be able to do at live events or at, or digitally. So in my case, I would probably go and develop either a relationship program, like I would talk about the kind of stuff that we've learned from the Hadza Bushmen, that we've learned from, social anthropology and stuff around the underpinnings of relationships and that kind of stuff. Or I might do something similar like that in the world of parenting, because of course, I have a slightly unique view of parenting compared to most parents, and that is that I have a 20-year-old son and I have an 18-month-old daughter, and so I've had some interesting observations from seeing that two different positions in two different generations, and of course we've observed some really fascinating stuff with the Bushmen around parenting. So if I were starting brand new businesses, that's probably where I would go. Great question, Tradian. Thanks very much. All right. Yes, I will. All right. So now, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to move into module 4. Good morning. How are you? Oh, good. So we're going to go into module 4, and that's going to pick up where we left off yesterday with module 3 around the role maps. So I'll do it like we did yesterday. This is a longer module than module 3 was, so I'm going to go into quite a lot of detail. And what we're going to be talking about is once you've, and by the way, this will be helpful to you. Remember that most people that are consuming this product later, they will have done module 3, they will have done their homework, and then they will have pressed play and done module 4 when they were ready. If you have not done the homework from module 3, then I highly recommend just jotting out something really quickly right now, because you'll find it more practical and usable to have your role map in front of you as we go through this next step. And so even if you haven't fleshed it out perfectly, I still recommend fleshing something out, because that way you won't learn this stuff theoretically, you'll learn it practically. In other words, you'll be looking at your role map and going, oh, that's what he means by that. And so I think that that'll be more practical for you. So I'll go through how we use the role maps to spot trouble areas in the business, and then to chart out our plan for exiting various roles in the business. So that's what we're going to be doing in this module. When we're done with that module, I'll assign some homework in that module again, and then we will take a small bio break, because this module is a little bit longer. We'll take a small bio break, and that'll also be a chance for you to maybe to get a start on the homework assignment. And it's actually a short homework assignment, so you should be able to get it done during the break. And then I'll come back and take all your questions. What I'm going to focus on, and guys, when you guys are curating the questions, if you can aim mostly for questions related to what we're doing relative to the role maps now. We can take general business questions at the end of the day. That's super fun. But for this module, let's try and get questions related to role maps and related to role map diagnostics. Okay, are you guys all ready? All right, I hope so. All right. Hi, welcome back. I'm Eric Edmeades, and you're now on Module 4 of Business Freedom Foundations. And in Module 4, what we're going to be doing is taking the role map that you built in Module 3 and now learning how to use it as a diagnostic tool and as a planning tool. Now, I mentioned to you in Module 3 that you can use this either at the beginning, at the inception of a business when you're first starting it off. And of course, in that case, your name is in just about every box. Or you could use the same tool if you have 2 or 3 employees, in which case your name is still in a lot of boxes and the other 2 names are in a lot of boxes too. Or you can use this if you have a much larger business, in which case you might find that your name is still in multiple boxes, and you might find that there are other people's names in lots of different boxes. So we're going to go through this from a number of different perspectives. But I want to pick up with a story that I shared with you yesterday. You know the story where I bought my movie studio and they said to me, if you lose this guy, you lose the whole business. And so I want to remind you what happened there is that I wasn't too worried about losing that one guy, because he was a lifer. I mean, he'd been there for so many years already, and he wasn't planning to leave at all. That said, when you spot an iceberg, you still want to adjust the course of the ship a little, don't you? Even if you don't think you're going to hit it, you just want to create a little bit of distance. And so we still did this role mapping exercise. And so as we did the role mapping exercise, and I'll remind you from Module 3, what that meant was creating the blank template of the role map with empty boxes, 1 box for each role, And then what we did is populate it, just like you've done for your homework. So that means putting names in the boxes. And if you are doing more than 1 role, then your name goes in more than 1 boxes. And if somebody else is doing more than 1 role, then their name goes in more than 1 box. And then you might even find that there's some boxes where there's people job sharing, or there's 2 or 3 different people sharing responsibility for a role, in which case you would put all of those names in that given box. One distinction I want to offer you is that there are some roles, like for example, underneath your sales director, you might have a number of different salespeople. That doesn't involve putting a lot of different names in 1 box called salespeople. It means having multiple boxes called salespeople with individual names in them. Now, we did this exercise for the film studio. And as we looked at this role map, we did it on a huge whiteboard. And as we looked at this role map, it was absolutely clear. It was completely and absolutely clear why, if we lost this one guy, we were in serious trouble across the board. And that's because his name was peppered all over the place. He was managing the department. He was over here managing the model builds. He was here doing this, and he was here doing that. And he was basically everywhere. And so the challenge is that, God forbid anything ever happened to him, but if we had to hire somebody to replace him, there's no human on earth that could do that. No human on earth. And I mean that. What I'm saying is this is a studio that had been part of Lucasfilm for 30 years. And he'd been working there for a lot of those years. And he'd been learning each of these roles and even developing them. And so to go out into the world and try to find somebody who had his exact unique set of skills and knowledge and talent was impossible. There was no possible way. There was nobody on earth that could do that. And I could see now why this guy was such a major iceberg. And so we had to start steering the ship away from the iceberg. So how did we do that? Well, we went through the role map and we used it as a diagnostic tool. We took a look at the different trouble spots that a role map might have. So the first kind of trouble spot that I want you to look for on your role map is anybody's name in too many boxes, including yours. Anybody's name in too many boxes. So if you're looking at your role map and you see that there's one name, your name or somebody else's name in a multitude of boxes, then what you might want to do is take out a little red pen and just put an asterisk in every single box where that name is, because what you're learning is that you now have one person that's spread entirely too thin. And God forbid something happens to that person, you're going to have a major problem, especially if that person is you. I'll tell you something. One of the key things about having business freedom is having safety for you and your family. And that is that if something ever happened to you, that your business can continue to operate without you. Well, if your name is in a lot of boxes, not only will your business have a hard time operating without you, but in many cases, your business will be over without you. And that's not ideal. I think we could agree. And so the first diagnostic step here is to take a look at the role map and identify any areas where there is one name in too many boxes. All right. Now, your second diagnostic step is to take a look at the role map and identify if there are boxes that have too many names in them. And I would say to you that any box that has more than one name in it is potentially a trouble spot. Now, every now and again, in the new age world of job sharing, it's entirely possible that you could have two people in a given job. But even then, I would want you to make sure that one of them was primary, that one of them was actually truly responsible for the delivery of, and the performance of that job, so that there is a one single accountable person. Ideally, every box has its own name. And so the second step is to identify on your role map any trouble spots indicated by too many people responsible for one job. And then your third diagnostic step is to take a look at something a little bit more esoteric. And that is to identify any time that somebody is in a box that is not keenly associated with their passion. What I mean is that as best possible, you want people in jobs that they love. As best possible, you want people doing jobs where the vast majority of their day is spent doing enjoyable tasks. I'll tell you something. When your staff is doing jobs, when your staff have tasks that they find enjoyable, and when they come in the day and out of their 8 hours, they find 7 of those hours really enjoyable because they enjoy their tasks, those people don't call in sick. And those people don't tend to leave their jobs. They tend to be lifers. They tend to stay. And so what you want to identify in your role map is any box that has a mismatched name in it. Now, in particular, I want you to think about you potentially as the business owner, because you probably have boxes that your name is in. And so you've got a couple of trouble problems. One is your name is probably in quite a lot of boxes. The second one is that your name might be job sharing with other people in boxes. And then the third one is your name is probably in boxes for jobs you don't really enjoy. And so you can see how when I sit down with a client for the very first time and I do a role map for them and I take a look at what's going on, and I've really baffled some of my clients because we sit down with the role map and we simply create the role map. They don't say anything, but just in their tone of voice and what I see on the role map, I'm able to tell them what some of the challenges they're having in their business are. And they're like, how do you know all that? It's right here on the map. It makes it really, really clear. And so by identifying each of those trouble spots, you really give yourself an opportunity to begin an incremental process of improvement. One of those things is to get yourself out of the boxes you need to get out of. Now, let's talk for a moment about exit strategies. Let's talk a little bit about exit strategies. I remember once seeing a business guru from Asia, and he stood up on stage and he says, "You don't need an exit strategy," he said. "In today's day and age, you don't need an exit strategy." And then he went on to say, "After all, if you got on a plane and you found out that the pilot had an exit strategy, how would you feel about that?" So, of course, that gets a bit of a giggle from everybody, right? Yeah, it creates a vision of the pilot jumping out the window, right? But I want to put it to you another way. I'm not getting on the plane if the pilot doesn't have an exit strategy. I'm not getting on the plane if the pilot doesn't have an exit strategy. And his exit strategy or her exit strategy should be to fly the plane to the destination for which I bought my plane ticket, to then open the doors, let me off the plane, and to make sure that I get my bags delivered there with me. That should be the exit strategy. If that's not the exit strategy, I'm not getting on the plane. Now, I will back up and say, I don't think that you need to have a specific exit strategy at this point, because frankly, the pace of change in business is so rapid that if you think you can predict what your exit strategy might be in 3, 4, 5, 10 years, well, you have a better crystal ball than I do. But I will tell you a fundamental truth. And the fundamental truth is that no matter which exit strategy you might wish to employ, if you have not first performed an entire array of mini exits first, then you can't possibly execute an effective exit strategy at all. Let me say that again. Whether you would like to take your company public, or whether you would like to sell it to somebody privately, or whether you'd like to sell it to private investors, or whether you would like to partner it off, or whether you'd like to sell it to the employees one day, or whether you'd like to license it or franchise it. No matter what you might want to do to get out of that business one day, if your name is in a multitude of boxes in that business, it will be incredibly difficult for you to exit. In fact, there are a few scenarios where you might be able to, but it will involve you exiting and becoming an employee of the new owners. Not ideal. And so running this diagnostic plan on your role map by looking at your role map and really identifying what's not right in the business, because your name or anybody's name is in too many boxes, because a box has too many names in it, or because there are people mismatched to their roles. In other words, their name is in a box that does not match their skill set or their passion. If you can identify those problems at any stage of business, it can be incredibly useful. And so what happened with our film studio was we started identifying all the boxes that our guy was in. And we looked at the boxes and said, okay, how can we get him out of that box? And then how can we exit him from that box? And how can we exit him from that box and this box and that box? And over the next few months, we slowly started exiting him out from each of these boxes. And then something happened. Something happened. A family issue took place. And I think part of it was that his wife was offered a really cool job in New York. And one day he announced, guys, I'm leaving the state. I'm going to New York. And I don't have any choice in the matter. I got to go. And he was heartbroken and we were heartbroken. But you know what was really fascinating? When we went to replace him, we only had to replace him in his primary box as a visual effects supervisor. We did not need to replace him in every other box. We didn't need that because we'd already done it. And what was really amazing is we hired this incredible woman. And she came in and she'd just been working on some fabulous movies. She'd worked with Angelina Jolie on the movie Salt. And then she was and her next movie after that would be, I think, The Little Prince. I mean, she's just an incredible woman. She was one of the real gifts of that time of my life. I enjoyed working with her so much. And I'm really aware that if we tried to get her to do the job before, it would have been too much. She would never have accepted it. But because we'd done all these mini exits, she was able to slide into the box she was meant to be in. And here's the real kicker for you. If you really want to understand the power of this, I bought this company and it was losing $1 million a year when I bought it. And the first year I had it, it still lost about $800,000. And the second year, it still lost about $700,000 or $800,000. But I will tell you that the day that our guy left and the day that our new woman joined and the 6 months that followed that were the very first 6 months in the history of the company before I bought it and after that it turned a profit. I'm not kidding you. It had never turned a profit. Not from the day it started had it turned a profit. And then now, for the very first time, it turned a profit. Now, I don't want to suggest for a minute that it turned a profit because our friend left. That's not it at all. It turned a profit because he left so professionally and he helped us make the mini exits out of all the other boxes so that when he left his larger box, it didn't kill us. It wasn't a big iceberg. It was simply a thing that needed to be dealt with. And so I want you to understand that no matter what size of business you're at now, whether it's a larger business like I was just describing, or whether it's like me when I first started my company, where I was a complete solopreneur and I'm sitting down in my living room, filling out my role map and realizing that my name was in every single box. It doesn't matter where you are, this tool can be one of the most powerful things for you. And so what I want to suggest to you is for a homework assignment, these are the steps I want you to follow. The first thing I want you to do is to highlight any trouble spots indicated by one person's name being in too many boxes. And then step 2 is to highlight any trouble spots indicated by any box having too many names in it. And then I want you to highlight any trouble spots indicated by somebody being in a box for a job that they really ultimately don't love. And then I want you to do the fourth step. And this is mostly for you now, right? The rest of it is for your whole team. Whether you have a team of 1 or a team of 200, it's for your whole team. But this next step is just for you. And that is that I want you to create a list of all the jobs you want to quit. Your quit list. Yeah, you are a quitter in this case. And I want you to create a list of all the jobs that you would ultimately like to leave or that you would ultimately like to exit in your business, and then prioritize it. In other words, prioritize it in terms of urgency, like which ones do you want to leave first. So in my case, I sat down, I created this list. The very first thing that I wanted to stop doing was shipping and receiving stuff in the warehouse. I did not want to do that in my company anymore. I thought it was absolutely crazy. I'm in the sales room making all kinds of money for my company, and then I'm stopping and I'm spending 2 hours getting dirty, trying to fix equipment that I had no business fixing, trying to box up stuff, having to wait for the UPS guy when I could have been over here making more money for my company. I didn't want to be doing that anymore. Boom, right at the top of the list, no more shipping and receiving. And then what did I also not want to do? Bookkeeping. I didn't want to be doing any of that bookkeeping, invoicing, and accounting. Oh, you know what else? I didn't want to be the warehouse manager. I also ultimately didn't want to be the operations manager. I didn't want to be the IT manager. I didn't really want to be the only salesperson. And then, in fact, I didn't want to be a salesperson at all. In truth, I didn't even want to be the sales director. In fact, long term, I didn't even want to be the managing director. And so I created that list and I put it in order. And that became my plan. That became the path to business freedom. And I can tell you something. If you just do this one exercise, you can change your entire life. And I said to you at the beginning of this program that some of the things we're discussing here might be so simple as for you to discount them. Please do not discount what I've just described to you. It is one of the most powerful things you could possibly do because it will change the way you view your business. Here's an example. You might, for instance, feel as though you can never give up certain jobs in your company. And as a consequence of that, you probably really dislike doing them. So there are probably jobs in your company right now that you wish you didn't have to do. In fact, I want to suggest to you that I'm pretty certain there are jobs like that in your company that you wish you didn't have to do. And here's what's crazy. If you wish you didn't have to do it, then you probably procrastinate it sometimes. Or when you finally do it, you might rush it. It might not be the best quality because you don't really like doing it. So you're whipping through it pretty quickly, right? And what I want to suggest to you is that the minute you create this plan, the minute you can see that you have a plan for not having to do that job, you won't dislike it quite as much because you will begin to realize that you're doing it for a short period of time. And there's a significant psychological freedom in that knowledge. And so you're going to create this list and prioritize it. Now, when we get to the next module, we're going to talk about some of the specific and logistical steps you can take to get yourself out of those boxes. We're going to talk about some of the psychological triggers and hooks that keep you trapped in doing those jobs. But the first step is for you to really know which the jobs are and how you want to get out of them. And I want to leave you with this note or with this thought. This system is so powerful. It is so powerful that one day I took myself out of the managing director box of my company. I took myself out and I put in a guy named Richard. And Richard became the managing director of my company. I didn't have to be there. Richard was running the show. Now, some of the things that we're going to discuss in the balance of this program are so powerful that this is what happened. When I realized that I wanted to sell my company, I'm not kidding you. It was a weird magical thing. And you know how weird magical things happen sometimes. I made a decision that I wanted to sell my company, but I had never sold a company before. So I didn't really know much about how to sell a company. I kid you not, my phone rang at home. Nobody had my home number. And the guy on the end of the phone said, "Hi, I'm interested in buying your company." It was the strangest thing. I ended up having a long conversation with him. His name was Paul. Turned out that they were looking for a company exactly like mine. We started a negotiation. I told him how much I wanted for the company. He said that was fine. No negotiating. It was a really clean, simple deal. It required investigation and they had to do due diligence and stuff. So it took some time to make it happen, but it was very clean. And then one day, the accountant that was working with Paul called me up and he said, "Eric, you have a major problem in your company and you need to do something about it." I said, "What is it?" And he goes, "Your managing director. We know him. We used to work with him. And at first we thought that was going to be really exciting to have him in the business because we worked with him before. So if we buy the company, nice to have somebody running the company that we already know. But we had lunch with him yesterday. And he told us that he was doing what he could to devalue the company so that we could get a better deal. You need to fire him. I was astounded. I mean, I was completely astounded. And it makes me think a lot about authenticity. You know, I think one of the instincts of human beings is that we would rather have an authentic enemy than an inauthentic friend. And I had an inauthentic friend running my company. And so I had to fire him. But here's the really funny part of this. When I looked at the company in the whole time he had been managing it, he had not managed to devalue it, not one bit. He hadn't managed to hold it up, not one bit. He hadn't cost a single deal in one place. And you know why? Because everybody in the company was so well trained. The system was so well done. People loved their jobs so much that his job as managing director was the true job of stewardship. He wasn't having to make lots of decisions. The business ran really smoothly. So all he was really doing was facilitating communication within predetermined systems and procedures. And so even though he was trying to damage the business, he couldn't. That's business freedom. That's what I want for you. So get your homework done now before we go to the next module. Get the homework done now, because when we go into the next module, it will be way more powerful if you've got your prioritized list and you've identified your trouble spots. So with that, well done so far, and I'll see you in module 5. Clear. Was that fun for you guys? Was it good? Do you have questions? I hope so. We're going to take a very short, like 3 or 4 minute break. I need a break. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to take all your guys' questions before we head into the next module. Cool. Break time. We're live. Welcome back, guys. I hope that was a good break for you. I'm ready for questions. If you guys can cue those up onto the screen. All right. We have an anonymous question. I don't usually entertain anonymous questions, but we'll do it in this case. I did a role map, but I'm still in almost all the roles. Nevertheless, I have a team of 4 other people working with me. All boxes have my name and another name in it. Or maybe I did the homework incorrectly. I don't think this is okay. I've run an HR management consulting business for almost 8 years already. Any suggestions? You are absolutely right. It is not okay. It is not okay. Now, I wish I had your name so I could be a little bit more personal in this response, but I'm going to suggest that there are people in your life that have occasionally suggested that you have tendencies toward control issues. I just am making a guess. I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's 100% true, but what you're describing to me, if I looked at your role map, I would look at that and I would see your name in all these boxes and then you in boxes with other people. And I would immediately deduce from that that you are trying to hold on too tightly in the business. And I understand why you're doing that, if that's what's going on. And so what I want to tell you is that in the next module, we're going to go through some very specific steps. They're going to help you to change some of the psychological things that are holding you and making you do that. And then they're also going to give you some logistical steps you can take. Because here's probably one of the challenges. If your name is in a box with somebody else, it's because ultimately you don't fully trust them to do the job properly. Would you agree? Maybe. And if your name is in lots and lots of other boxes, then it means a number of different things. Like, for example, you don't yet feel like you have the budget to hire people in that area, or you haven't yet found the right person in that area, or you're too busy and you don't have time to train somebody else, or you don't have the confidence that somebody else can do that job at the level that needs to be done. And if you listen to all of that, much of it comes down to control and certainty. And so when we go through the next module, I think you're going to get some really, really good pointers there. The one thought that I have for you is this. What information do you need to have from the other 3 or 4 people about the role that they share with you, that if you had that information, you wouldn't need to be in that box anymore? Think about that, and it'll fit really nicely into the next module. Just give some thought to, imagine that at the end of every day, those people could send you just a little email. And what would you need to have in that email for you to feel like you don't need to be in that box anymore? All right. And then when we get to the next module, I think you'll get the rest of what you need. Great question. Thanks very much. Prit you, if it is a new business, should I make a role map according to the current situation, or should I take under consideration what I want it to look like in the future? Great question. The role map should reflect the roles that will be in the business over time. And I would suggest to you that even if you're completely on your own by yourself, there's still a managing director or a CEO or a president, then there's still a marketing director or a sales director. There's still an operations director. There's still a finance director. There's still an IT manager. It may be that you're doing all those things, but those roles exist today. Now, one of the ways that's easier for people to do it is to imagine what it will be like in 3 years or 4 years. Then it's easier to see those roles as separate roles. Because what happens sometimes is people look and go, well, yeah, I mean, IT manager is a role, but it only takes me half an hour a week. It's not a big deal. I wouldn't want to hire somebody for it. You're right. You might not want to hire somebody for it. It's still a role. Even today, even if you're a solopreneur, it's still a role on the role map. And maybe you can put your name in there, and maybe it doesn't have to be that high on the priority list for you to get out because it's such a low time commitment. But in time, as you grow your business, it's going to become a bigger issue. And so it might be easier for you to see that if you imagine your business 3 years out. So Prit, the answer to your question really is that the role map should be both the way things are today and how you want them to be, because they probably really aren't that different. It's just that they might feel different at the moment. Great question. Thank you very much. When you start a business, your name is pretty much everywhere in the role map, I understand. If you've been contracting a few things through Upwork, for instance, but I worry about continuity of business if things go wrong. Those people have no incentive once the contract is closed. Any tips about how to externalize certain tasks? Okay, so this is from Raphael Hernu. So Raphael, I want to suggest that there's a difference between a contracted job and a contractor. So for example, I have done projects where I've used something like Upwork or Freelance or Odesk or the various, or Fiverr even. I've used a bunch of these different things to manage individual projects. And I wouldn't then put that person in a role map. I might make them a project manager within a given project, but they wouldn't necessarily sit in a permanent role in the role map. The difference might be, though, if I then take one of those people on and take them on as a contractor. In other words, I've signed them on for a fixed period of time, not necessarily a fixed given project. So maybe they're on for 6 months or a year, or they're going to be on for 2 years or something like that. Now, I believe that you would put them on the role map, and you can externalize the project really nicely by doing that. I did this years ago where my company in England, we wanted to develop a new software platform, and it was a really interesting situation. We'd done this really cool exercise that we call iceberg spotting. And when we did the iceberg spotting exercise, we identified that there was something missing from our business. And so we went out and hired a team in India to create a software platform for us. And what the software would do is manage all of our workshop routines. So it would track equipment through the workshops. You could see who repaired what and which parts they used and all that fun stuff. But we wanted to add an extra twist to it. We wanted, because we'd done this iceberg spotting thing, when one of the icebergs we'd spotted is that our two biggest competitors were companies called Symbol and Telzon, both now owned by Motorola. But at the time, they were billion-dollar companies that wanted badly to put me out of business. And so what we realized is that if they really wanted to put me out of business, what they might start doing is underbidding contracts at a loss leader, in which case we wouldn't be able to compete. So we had to figure out a way around that iceberg. And our answer was to look at the single biggest complaints that clients had about them. Well, the biggest complaint that clients had about Symbol in particular was equipment would go missing all the time. And they could never get any information. They'd call one person and they would be sent over to another department and to another department, and they just couldn't get any information. And so I thought, wow, we have all that information, and we could certainly put somebody on the help desk and they could just simply answer the call whenever it came in. But man, that's expensive to have a full-time person sitting on the help desk waiting for the occasional phone call. And so, but then if I job share it with somebody, then that person might be distracted when they're over here, and then they won't be there when the phone rang, and I don't know what to do. And then it dawned on me, well, if UPS and Federal Express let you track their packages online, why don't we do the same thing? And at that point, as far as I know, UPS and FedEx were the only companies in the world that were allowing two-way use of the internet, where you could pull information, but you could also push information, or you could take information about your packages. And so we hired this company in India, and they built that platform for us. Now, initially, it was a project, but then it became an ongoing contract within the company because it was a big software project. And so eventually what happened is Amit became the person in the role map in the operations department responsible for that software. And as it turns out, funny enough, we ended up hiring him. We went to the company we were working with. We got permission from them to hire him directly, and he actually ended up contracting for us directly. But even when he was just a contractor, he was still in that role map because it had gone beyond just being a simple project. So, Rafael, I hope that gives you some guidance or gives you some ideas about how you can handle that. Next question. Marcus B. How granular should the role map be? For instance, should it just say marketing, or should it go down to specifics like Facebook, post writing, blog article writing, email marketing, and so on? Marcus, that's a fantastic question. The answer is kind of two-part. The first answer is that you go as granular as you plan to grow. So what I mean is that if you can envision, say in the next 3 years, being at a place where blog article writing is a role, then you go that granular and you make that a role. But if you don't see it that way, if you ultimately think that you're going to end up with one person in charge of marketing that's going to handle your social media, Facebook post writing, and the blog writing, then you would have those as tasks as part of the procedures or processes under that role. And we're going to come to that in the next module. So it really comes down to your view of whether or not those things are individual roles. One of my clients runs a massive website that has like 100 million visitors a year that comes to that website. And so you can imagine that they have role for blog article writing and article writing, and those are individual roles. They have full-time writers that only write, in which case they should have that as a role. Whereas other companies, writing a blog article is something that is done as part of many different tasks relative to, say, social media or relative to, say, internet marketing. So it has everything to do with your vision of how those roles will develop in your business. Great question, Marcus. And when we go into the next module, when we talk about proceduralizations and systemization, that'll probably give you a little bit more clarity as well. Suzanne Jones. I have a hard time chunking things down. I see big picture, which involves a whole lot of projects and roles. What can you advise for getting things prioritized? Mind mapping seems obvious, yet I can't get myself to sift things enough to get them down. Okay, Suzanne, I can relate to what you're saying so fully and completely. I've spent a huge part of my life just like that. I can see the big picture and I can see all the stuff. And then when it gets down to actually prioritizing and stuff, that's always been a struggle for me. It isn't anymore. And I'm going to give you a few of the clues as to how I dealt with that. The one is get yourself a really good assistant or project manager. And it shouldn't be somebody who's like you, right? It should be somebody who's incredibly different from you, in fact. It should be the kind of person that maybe you even think of as a little negative because you go, we're going to create all this incredible stuff. And they go, whoa, 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 how long will that take? How much will it cost? What resources do we need? It's like having somebody like that around can help to ground you as long as you're willing to listen to them, as long as you're willing to take their advice. So getting a really good assistant or a project manager can help you a lot with that. The other thing is one of my favorite tools around prioritization is really very simple. And it actually comes from a principle that Brian Tracy calls eat that frog. It's not a very vegetarian principle. But the idea is that when you've got a big, ugly, nasty project or goal that you don't really want to do, you prioritize it first. Here's kind of the math. I want you to imagine, Suzanne, that you have two projects. You have two 4-hour projects and you have an 8-hour day. Theoretically, you can get both of your projects done that day. Okay. First thing is that how long will it take you to do a 4-hour project if you have 10 5-minute interruptions? Well, it's not going to take you 4 hours and 50 minutes. You understand that every single interruption doesn't just add the time of the interruption. It interrupts a thought process. It's a little bit like reading a book and losing your bookmark. You suddenly have to go in and find where you were again. And so if you have 10 5-minute interruptions, that might cost you 3 hours. So suddenly one 4-hour task can take all day because you've allowed interruptions all through the day. Then the second part of it is that if you're doing a task that you really dislike, so if you're eating your frog and you're doing that task you really don't like, then you're going to be potentially more susceptible to distraction. In fact, if you're doing a task that you really love, it's hard for people to get your attention. If you're doing a task that you really don't like, even you can distract yourself with a thought, right? So one of the things that's really important to pay attention to here is trying to minimize those distractions. In fact, I recommend that you take a look at Cal Newport's book, Deep Work. Really, really fascinating conversation about creating that psychology around really going deep dive into something. Then the next part is this. If you have two tasks, you have your 4-hour task you love and your 4-hour task you hate, which one do you do first? Well, most people are not so good at what M. Scott Peck called the delay of gratification in The Road Less Traveled, right? Like he said, if you could just master this one skill, the delay of gratification, it can improve the quality of your life dramatically. Well, I'll tell you what, as an entrepreneur, that's totally true. Because if you have a 4-hour task that you hate and a 4-hour task that you love, if you do the task that you love first, which is what most people do, then here's what's interesting. You have this 4-hour task that you find enjoyable. And then when you're done, you're going to have to do a 4-hour task that you find distasteful. How long do you think it's going to take for you to do the 4-hour task that you find enjoyable? A good 8 hours or more, right? Because you're enjoying it and you don't want to have to do the task you don't like. So it's easy to drag it out. Whereas if you switch things around and you do the 4-hour task that you really don't like, and you're going to reward yourself with the 4-hour task that you really do like, how long do you think it takes to do the 4-hour distasteful task? I'm going with 90 minutes because, hey, you don't like it, you want to get through it, get it done, and you're rewarding yourself with the task that you really like. Now, I hope this helps a little bit with prioritization, Suzanne, but I want to offer one more thing, and it has to do with this whole concept of law of attraction. And I think I mentioned this yesterday, but I want to be very clear that I think law of attraction is so much simpler than it's ever been described. And it is simply this. The more enjoyment you have in your life, the more attraction you create. It's done. So if you as a business owner spend 100% of your time just loving your business, then it's going to be a lot easier to attract investors and staff and partners and suppliers and lenders and everybody else. Whereas if you have a business and you're spending 70% of your time doing things that you hate or that you really don't enjoy, then that's going to be repulsive energy, the opposite of attraction. So what that means is, let's imagine, Suzanne, that you have a meeting, a very important meeting with a top client or a would-be investor or somebody you're trying to recruit into the business. In that case, what I want to suggest to you is that you should start the day with the task you love, not with the frog. And the reason for that is really simple. If you start the day with the task you hate, because that's a good habit generally, then what that means is that when your meeting shows up, you're going to have a bit of icky energy on you. It's going to be like, oh, you've just been doing this distasteful task, and it's kind of like it's got this weird vibration on you. And they're going to pick that up no matter how big a smile you put on your face. Conversely, if you do the task you love, if you prioritize the task you love before this important meeting, then when they arrive at the meeting, you're going to have a really nice vibration, a vibration of enjoyment, of satiation, of satisfaction. And so that's going to come across and create a more attractive energy for you. So these are some of my prioritization tips, Suzanne. I hope they help. Pavi from Finland. Hey, we are really international today. Although really, I mean, Estonia and Finland are very close. We've got a lot of Estonians, a lot of Finns. I need more countries on the list here. All right. So Pavi says, or Pavi? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I hope I am. I am just starting my business, but I already know that I don't enjoy all the things that it entails. For example, I know that someone who loves marketing would do better work with the marketing. So would it be smart to hire some marketing guru to help me with that part? Yes. I don't have more to say. Yes. That's exactly what we're talking about here. And here's the challenge. There are a number of things that might prevent somebody from taking that step. They might be concerned about the budgetary constraints of it, or they might be concerned that the person won't do as good a job as them and all that kind of stuff. And when we go to the next module, we will break all those things down to make it even easier. But Pavi, you're exactly on the right step. If you don't enjoy doing it, no matter how good you are at it, if you don't enjoy doing it, you will never do it as well as somebody who loves it. It's just that simple. So what I would suggest is that you get somebody who loves it. And by the way, you said hire some marketing guru. Well, you know, the word guru is kind of fascinating, but what I'm suggesting is that you hire somebody who has a real passion for marketing, especially for real passion for marketing what you are doing. And if you can find somebody who just loves it all day long, they're going to be grateful for their job, they're going to be inspired and motivated, and they're going to stay with you forever. So, great question, and yes. Lena Pelving from Sweden. Wow, we're branching out into Scandinavia now. All right, so when you look at the names in the boxes, I want to figure out if that person works with passion or just works. What do you do? Okay, sorry. When you look at the names in the boxes and want to figure out if that person works with passion or just works, what do you do? Do you only use how they talk about their work and listen to their voice to determine if they're passionate, or do you have other tools? Lena, that's a great question. For the most part, I would look at two core things. I would look at the work product. If they are consistently producing really high quality work, if they are consistently producing and going beyond the call of duty, if they really are producing, like if they're exceeding your expectations on a regular basis, they are likely in a job that they have some passion for, likely. And if they are joyful on a regular basis, if they seem happy, if they seem focused, if they seem positive, then they're likely in a passion-based job. If they have both of those things, then they're probably in a passion-based job. If they are complaining a lot, if they show up late, if they have more negatives to talk about than positives, if they are late with assignments, or if the quality is somewhat lacking, then I would suggest that they probably are not in a passion-centric job. Now, there's some more stuff that you can do to really dive deeper into this. You can look at like Myers-Briggs. You can look at our 8-path system. You can look at DISC. You can look at the Colby index. There's a number of different tests you can do out there that can really help you to identify and match people with the roles a little bit more deeply. But in the meantime, I think the test is really simple. High quality work output, great attitude, probably they're in the right box. And we've got Janelli. Janelli, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, maybe Janelli. How can you ensure that employees do not feel unmotivated when their job responsibilities are reorganized? Let me just say that again. How can you ensure that employees do not feel unmotivated when their job responsibilities are reorganized? Okay, all right. Let's talk about parenting for a minute. Why not, right? So one of my rules about parenting is also a really great rule for employees. And the rule is this. As a parent, every single interaction you have with your children is helping them to develop meanings or rules about the way the world works. And so what that means is that children are basically born blank. They don't really have any meanings. They're born into this world of breathing and air, and they cry about it to begin with. And then they get into their life. And then their stomach feels a little wrong because they need some food. They don't really know what to do about that. They cry. And the next thing you know, they have a boob and they feel very good about that. And so they've learned crying gets me the boob and I get to eat and it's fabulous. And then, but then their diaper feels uncomfortable because it's like wet or worse. And then they cry again. And then somebody comes along and changes it and they create another meaning. If I cry, then I get what I want. The challenge is that if you take that child out to like 12 to 18 months old, when they actually start having words and gestures and stuff, if you respond to crying for every single thing they want, then you're just teaching them to whine about everything all the time. Because the meaning they've created is crying gets me what I want. And so the next responsibility of the parent is to think differently, is to go, wow, I want my child to be an effective communicator. And so therefore, I should respond best when they communicate effectively. I hope this makes sense. Now, here's another example of this that really relates to what you're talking about. Let's imagine that we've got a 3-year-old child playing on the carpet right over here. And it's my child, and I suddenly realize, oh, we've got to go. And I walk over, and the child is playing with some toys and stuff, and I pick up the child, and I go, let's go, and we head out to the car. I want you to just stop for a minute and ask yourself, what meaning or meanings might the child assess when they were sitting there blissfully playing, and I just scooped them up and took them out to the car? What meanings might they create at that point? Well, I'm going to suggest to you that one of the meanings might be that I'm not that important. As a child, the child might go, well, I'm not that important. I was playing. I wanted to keep playing, but I was simply stopped from playing. I am not so significant. I'm not so important. Another meaning might be adults make up all the rules, right? You see how that could work. And so now I want you to take that forward to your employees. The way you worded your question, how can I ensure that employees do not feel unmotivated when their job responsibilities are reorganized? The way you're writing that suggests that you reorganize the job and tell them. In other words, they've been reorganized. In other words, you pick them up off the floor and put them in the car without talking to them. But what if we go back to our toddler and we say, hey, we're going to be leaving soon. Would you like to leave now, or would you like to leave in 10 minutes? Or would you like to leave now, or would you like to leave in 5 minutes? Or would you like to leave your toys here, or would you like to bring them with you? Whatever the case might be. But the minute we involve the child in the conversation, the odds are that the child creates a more functional meaning. Oh, look, I matter. They asked for my opinion. Oh, and by the way, for those of you that are parents of very young children, like a year and 18 months, and you think they don't understand, let's remember, they do understand a lot more than we think they do. So it's still worth explaining what's going on, because then they create a meaning. Well, if it's true for a toddler, it's going to be true for your employee as well. So rather than reorganizing their job, why not let them participate in the reorganization of their job? And so that's how I would say the best way to make sure that they don't become unmotivated is that you allow them to participate in that reorganization conversation, allow them to co-create their new job rather than simply being dictated to. Then I think they'll stay much more motivated. Great question. Thanks, Janelli. Aaliyah, regarding the employees that Eric puts into his business role maps, they must pick up a lot of knowledge from Eric about business freedom. Doesn't this make them want to give up their employee status and become entrepreneurs themselves? And as such, close your ears. Don't listen to this question. Kelsey's listening to your question. Aaliyah, what are you doing to me over here? Doesn't this make them want to give up their employee status and become entrepreneurs themselves? As such a giver and share of knowledge, does Eric feel that all of his employees should go into business freedom too? I'm going to have a drink of water with that question. Maybe tequila. Okay, let's go back in time. Many years ago, when I had my very first company, I went to go to Tony Robbins' UPW, or Unlimited Power, or Unleash the Power Within weekend, I think they called it at that stage. And I went to it, and it was absolutely amazing. And as I was there, I noticed something really fascinating, is that a lot of the people that were there, that went to this program, ended up leaving relationships that they really needed to leave, ended up leaving jobs that they really needed to leave. But occasionally, people got very reactionary. They just walked on fire, and they got power, and they were excited. And then they left relationships and gave up on them, maybe earlier than they maybe should have, or they gave up on jobs before they should have. And I never really, I think in the end, everything works out perfectly. It just made me think to myself, I am not sending my employees to the seminar. That was my reaction. I was like, I'm not creating that kind of disruption in my business. What I did do, though, whenever we let somebody go, we would always encourage them to go to that seminar. Well, if they were already gone, it was a different thing, but we were really cautious of it. So that was my thought process at that stage. I've matured a little bit since then. And so, of course, now if one of my employees comes to me and says, wow, I would really like to have more business freedom, then, you have a couple of challenges. Is that on one level, that's a really positive thing, because the truth is a high-level employee should constantly be making themselves obsolete. That's the truth of it. A high-level employee should be helping you proceduralize, should be helping train the people around them. A really high-level employee should effectively be working toward a form of business freedom where their job is really quite straightforward and easy for them to do. Unfortunately, what happens with a lot of key employees is they recognize that by doing that, they feel that they create job insecurity for themselves. And I've had this happen in my businesses before, where you have a single person that wants to hold on to everything. They want to hold on to everything. They want to be integral to everything. They want to hold on tightly to everything. And then they also don't want to help proceduralize stuff so effectively. They don't necessarily want to help create templates for things because it's all inside their head. And they know that as long as it's inside their head, they're invaluable to the business and you can't lose them. And so what you have to do is find a balance in that, wherein your employees feel a strong enough level of significance and certainty that they can work toward creating a job obsolescence for themselves, because they know that it's going to create job progression for them within the business. And if one of your employees one day says, you know what, I really want to have business freedom and I want to do my own thing, you have a number of choices. One, let them go. Let them go do that thing. Support them in it. Maybe offer them some seed capital and send them on their way. Here's another thing you can do. Let them run a division of your business. Really, if I take a look at, for example, our company WildFit, I mean, that company's just been growing like crazy. And, 3 years ago, we had 5 coaches. Now we have 90 some odd coaches. In fact, the coaching business is really a business now. And it really needs somebody to run that business as a standalone business. It needs to be taken out, formed into its own company, and it needs to be run as an effective, powerful training company that creates the best health coaches in the world and helps them build really solid businesses for themselves. We know we need to do that. So if one of my staff came to me and said, oh, I really feel like I'd like to get out there and create business freedom for myself and be an entrepreneur, what I might do is go, well, hey, maybe there's a way, maybe you could be a partner in this business. Maybe you could help grow this business. We have other examples of that where somebody comes along and says, hey, I recently had this conversation with a member of staff and said, well, look, if you want real business freedom, why don't you take on one of the WildFit brands like WildFit for Moms and build that into a business? So maybe you can inspire your employees to be entrepreneurial, to create a business, to build business freedom for themselves within your mission and within your project. Because if you've trained them and you've taught them and you've inspired them, then you don't want to lose them. And so what you do is you try and create a career path for them that satisfy their needs, whether that's an employee path or an entrepreneur path. Great question, Aaliyah. Thanks very much. You just stop looking at business opportunities on the internet. All right. Hey, Maine Bob is back. Wow. All right. I'm a solopreneur. My first hire could be a business coach or a mentor. What are your thoughts on this? Yes. Yes. Listen to me now, Maine Bob and everybody else. Listen to me very carefully right now. Roger Federer has a coach. Why? Why does he have a coach? He is arguably the greatest tennis player ever to play tennis. Okay, I know that Rafael Nadal has beaten him more than he's beaten Rafael Nadal, but there's a whole complicated issue about court tennis and clay tennis. And I'm saying Roger Federer may well be the greatest tennis player in the history of tennis. He has a coach. Wayne Gretzky is without question the greatest hockey player that ever played in hockey, and he had a coach. And every great sports person and every sports person, frankly, in the professional sports world has a coach. Why do they have coaches? Wait, actors have coaches. Why? Why do they have coaches? I know what it is. I know exactly what it is. They have coaches because the opportunity is so significant. That must be it, right? I mean, if you're playing in professional tennis, you got to have a coach because the opportunity is so significant. You could make so much money. You could have such a big impact. You'd better have a coach. I mean, like somebody like Tiger Woods, speaking of making money in sports, even last year as a lackluster, washed up, maybe hopefully will in his life come back one day, but even last year he made $30 million. In his peak years, 2006, 2007, 2008, he broke $100 million. I mean, that's why you got to have a coach. The opportunity is massive. Of course, if you're the number 23 golfer, you're struggling to pay the rent, and if you're the number 87 golfer, you're selling cars on the weekends. So the opportunity is really great at the top, I guess. And the same with acting. I mean, look, Jerry Seinfeld, $800 million net worth, I read. And by the way, tied for first place with Larry David, who wrote Seinfeld, $800 million net worth. And then number two, $76 million. Number three, $52 million. By the time you get to number 27, the person's like filing for bankruptcy. I'm kidding, but only slightly. And the reason I'm mentioning this to you is if those people need to have coaches because the opportunity is so big, then I want to introduce you to a new sport. A sport that's not, for example, restricted by age. Because you know Roger, getting old now, they said, didn't they? Ooh, that made me mad last year. You know, he hadn't won a major in a few years, and last year he lost a few games and he had some injuries, and everybody started talking about it's time for Roger to retire. They did. You saw it. If you watch tennis at all, oh, it's time for Roger to retire. And I was like, oh, please let him have a comeback. I was like, by the way, in case you don't know this, he is once again the number one tennis player in the world. And he also has another world record, and that is he's the oldest man in history to have that record. In other words, at best, he's got a couple years left in him if he's real lucky, because his sport has a top end. If he was still in the top 10 at 40 years old, that would be a miracle. And by the way, he's capable of miracles, so I wouldn't be that surprised. But the point is that I want to introduce you to a totally different sport. It's a sport that's not age restricted, and it's a sport that has a significantly higher opportunity than any other sport that we've talked about. Hockey, golf, tennis, football, doesn't matter. And the sport is called entrepreneurship. It is a way more lucrative sport. Number one income levels in sports are in the hundreds of millions, and there's one or two people that ever pull that off. In the case of acting, you know, number one doesn't break $1 billion. And again, only a few people even get to those heights. In entrepreneurship, the number one person in entrepreneurship, in the game, in the sport of entrepreneurship, is worth close to $100 billion. And the number two is worth close to $100 billion. And number three is also in the $70 billion range. And number four, and number five, and number six. And by the time you're at number 10, they're still in the like mega billions. And then if you're down like into the top couple of thousand, these guys, they're struggling to get by because they're only worth a few hundred million. And then there are thousands of them that are worth in the tens of millions. I don't know how they make it work. I don't know how. And then there are tens of thousands of them that are worth single digit millions. Tens of thousands of them. Those people are suffering in a big way. What I'm trying to tell you is that the opportunity in entrepreneurship is so prevalent and so real and so huge from a personal freedom perspective, from an income perspective, from an impact on the world perspective, that why on earth would we not have a coach? It's insane to me that people don't get themselves a business coach, a mastermind group, a peer group, a mentor. Right now, I am here at Genius Network. I am a member of that mastermind. People often go, well, Eric, you probably don't need a coach anymore. Yes, I do. If I've done anything amazing in the world, it's because I've had the most incredible mastermind groups and the most incredible coaches in my life. Maine Bob, get yourself a mentor, get yourself a coach. Absolutely. You are in the most exciting sport in the world. It is so much more lucrative and rewarding than any professional sport if it's handled properly. Thank you for such a great question. Thank you. Little passion with that one, guys. All right. Rosa Davis. Oh, by the way, did any of you notice how I didn't slip in any attempt to sell mentoring services at all? Because I don't offer them. There you go. I mean, we'll talk maybe a little bit later about how I can support some of you, but that rant was a pure from the heart. If you are in business, you need, look, why make a bunch of mistakes that other people have already made? Why do that? The only mistakes that you should ever really make are purely original mistakes. You should be making a mistake with something that nobody else has ever made that mistake. Make original mistakes. Any mistake that you make more than once is now an actual mistake. If you make a mistake and it's original, it was an experiment. But if you repeat the same experiment and expect a different result, that's just insane. And a mentor can shortcut so many of those mistakes for you and allow you to go, like quantum leap, and grow so much more effectively. All right. Rosa Davis says, what signs should one look for to determine if an employee is not in the role they love? Well, Rosa, I think I addressed this a little bit with the previous question, but there are a couple of things like, if they show up late consistently, that is often a sign. Rosa, here's a funny thing. I don't use alarms to wake up. I don't set alarms. I mean, I'll set them sometimes if I've got a flight, or for example, I set one this morning because we have the live broadcast and I just, might need a reminder. It's not so much an alarm to wake me up. It's an alarm just to remind me I've got a live broadcast I need to show up for. But I don't wake up with alarms. And the reason I don't is that many years ago, I made an observation, and that was that as a kid, I never needed any help waking up on Christmas morning. Ever notice that? Like teenage kids, try to get them out to get them to go to school, right? Like, oh my God. Yeah, turn on the lights, play music, kick them, blow water on them. A lot of times teenagers need serious motivation to get out of bed. Somehow, December 25th, it's a totally different conversation. This is what it was like with my mom. I don't know what it was like in your family, but my mom's like, Eric, Nick's my brother, you are not to be up before 6 a.m. You are not to be up before 6 a.m. Go to bed. What time were we up? 4:30. 4:30. Oh, by the way, a week later, time to go to school. Guys, school starts at 9. You need to be up by 8. Guys, it's 8:15. Get up. It's 8:30. You got to get to school. What's going on there? What's going on there, I found, for me, was that when I had incredible positive anticipation about the day in front of me, my body clock would make sure, first of all, that I slept better. This is a fascinating thing. When you are like not looking forward to your day, I don't know, it affects the quality of sleep. When I am really excited about my day ahead, when I have really positive anticipation about that day, I sleep. I sleep really nicely. And then the other thing is I wake up with a jolt of excitement. I'm ready. And so I call it my Christmas Day meditation. And what I do at night is I imagine all the fun stuff that I'm going to get to do tomorrow. And then I wake up without an alarm. What I'm saying to you, Rosa, is that if your staff are constantly showing up late, that is generally an indication that there's something about their job that they're not excited about. Because if they were really, really excited about it, they would have the Christmas morning feeling every day. And my goal as an employer, my goal as a mentor, as an inspirer of entrepreneurs, is to help people build businesses around the world where their staff are so excited about what they're doing on a daily basis that they don't show up late, they show up early. So there's one sign that I would consider. Another sign is this. If you have a situation where employees are participating in what we would call below the line behavior, and below the line behavior refers to gossip, negativity, backstabbing, any of that kind of stuff where there's just politicking going on. If that's going on, then that is a symptom of emotional needs that are not being met by your employee. Your employee has some emotional needs that are not being met. And so what they're trying to do is meet those needs through negative means. This is a longer conversation, but if I give you a short version of it, if you have a child that's being ignored in the grocery store by its parents because they're trying to shop real quick, then that child is likely to act up. Is it true? The child's likely to, ask a lot of questions, maybe even yell and scream, maybe have a tantrum, maybe throw something on the floor. Because what's happening at the moment is they're feeling a lack of connection with their parents. They're not feeling significant and important. They're not feeling any sense of variety. Like some of their core emotional needs as a human being are not being met. They will find a way to meet them. And if that means yelling, if that means, complaining, if it means throwing something on the floor to get attention, then they'll do that. Well, employees are exactly the same. So if you have employees, for example, that are not getting their personal sense of significance met, or they're not feeling a really strong sense of connection with their team, if they're not feeling a real sense of certainty about their job, then what they will do is go and seek other ways of satisfying those emotional needs. And often, like the child in the grocery store, they'll turn to negative means. So here's an example. If somebody is feeling uncertain, then they will often turn to gossip, because gossip gives them a feeling of significance and certainty and connection with the people around them. It hits 3 of their big needs as a human. And so now they're gossiping. And that might tell you that they're not feeling fully fulfilled in their job. Obviously, we could go on for hours about this question, but I think that gives you 2 pretty solid nuggets to work with. Rosa, great question. Thanks very much. Rani. How many people have to be in the company in order for the role map to apply? Is there a minimum or a maximum? No. A role map applies with one person. One person. Listen to me. I sat in my living room in a little sleepy little town called Rington, just outside of Bristol in the United Kingdom. I had started my business out of necessity. What I mean by that is that I had rent to pay and I was not legally living in the UK at the time, so I couldn't even get a job. I'd been working for somebody else. That somebody else and I had some ethical mismatches, and I decided that it was time for me to leave. But my right to work in the UK was related to my job, so now I'm sitting in the UK with no work visa. And then on top of that, that employer owed me a huge amount of money. I'm talking about $150,000, $180,000 20 years ago, and didn't want to pay me because he was afraid that I would set up a competitive company with him. So now I'm sitting here with no money. I have a job offer in the Caribbean that I really want to take, but I don't have any money to get myself there. And I'm sitting there going, how am I going to pay the rent? And so I started a business. And I sat there with my role map, and I felt really, excited and free about starting a business. But as I filled out my role map and I realized that my name was in every single box, I felt really dejected. I thought, man, this is a mountain bigger than I'm ready to climb. It was scary for me. But then when I did that other step, from the homework in the last module, and I looked at each of the roles and I prioritized them, and I said, well, I want to be out of that role. And then I actually did some time estimates. I said, well, how long before I probably can stop doing the shipping and receiving? And I thought, you know what? I could probably do that almost instantly. If I landed a big enough deal, there'd be cash in that deal that would justify me hiring somebody, even if it was on a part-time basis or even on a casual basis, that I could just hire somebody for 4 or 5 hours. So I thought, okay, I might be able to get out of that role almost immediately. And then I kept looking at all the roles, and I realized it might take, a few weeks to get out of that one. It might take a few months to get out of that one. It might take a couple of years to get out of that one. And it might take a couple of years to get out of that one. And the weirdest thing is, Randy, as soon as I did that, I felt better. And I'm telling you, if there was only one thing that I did to create complete business freedom for myself, and there were many different things, but if there was one thing that was absolutely foundational to my ability to have complete business freedom, it was doing that exercise and creating my roadmap to freedom. Because once I'd created that roadmap, I was able to see the world properly for the first time. And it made such a big difference. So I don't care if you have one, if you have you, or if you have 3, or if you have 5, if you have 200. It starts getting a little bit complicated when you get out to a company the size of, say, over about 80 employees. Then the role map starts getting a little complicated. And then what I might do is departmental role maps. That's a different conversation for another day. Great question, Randy. Thanks very much. Lena, when you take the iceberg from several posts, does he or she train and teach the right people in the box and then leave? Is that the procedure? Okay, Lena, I think what you're saying is, if I've identified that one person is an iceberg and they are in many different boxes, and then the question is, how do I get them out of all those boxes? And should that person leave? All right. So in my situation that I described to you in that module, I had an employee that was in way too many boxes, but I didn't want to lose the employee. So I wasn't trying to get that employee to get themselves out of all the boxes so that I could get rid of them. My job was to get them out of all of those boxes so that they could really perform well and help grow the company. Think about this. How easy was it going to be for me to grow this company if I have one employee that is stretched so incredibly thin that he can't possibly take on one more thing, right? And so yes, of course, that person helped us develop the procedures and training and helped us recruit the right people, most of them from within the business, in order to get himself out of each of those boxes to make what we call mini exits. So he was like quitting jobs. On Thursday, he quit that job. And then on Friday, he quit that job. And 2 weeks later, he quit that job. And over the space of some weeks, he quit all of those jobs inside the business because he helped us train, recruit, and process so that we could have somebody else doing those jobs. And that left him in his ultimate job. Had he not had a family emergency at that point, he would have stayed on doing that job. It would have been fantastic. But because he had the family emergency, thank God we'd gone through that process, because now it meant that he could leave and that we only had to hire and replace him in one box. So the answer is that yes, that person that's in all those boxes should be helping you to put other people in those boxes. Now, Lena, I suspect I have an idea of where the question is coming from. And that is that, isn't it possible that that person might feel scarce about getting themselves out of all those boxes? Yes. And let me just explain that for everybody again, just in case I didn't say that clearly enough. It's possible that you have somebody who perceives that their job security is created by being completely indispensable to the business. And what that will create is their desire to be in as many boxes as possible and to hold on really tightly to everything. And so the challenge is that that person is a major iceberg, and somebody who thinks that way, bear in mind, that is a fundamentally lack-based thinking. That is fundamentally scarcity-based mindset. And so if you can't help them change that mindset, then you've got a problem. And the challenge is this: the problem is only going to get worse as your company grows. And the problem is only going to get scarier as your company grows, because the bigger your company gets, the more dependent you become on that person, the harder it's going to be for you to replace them or fire them or get them to get themselves out of those boxes. So it is absolutely imperative that you sit down with them and you make them completely understand that job security for them is not in being indispensable. It's in being indispensable because of the value they create, because of the loyalty you want to give them. And so they should be inspired and motivated to help you get them out of all those different boxes. And if you can do that effectively, they will help you get people out of all those boxes so that they can focus on the one job that really has a great career path for them. If you can't get them to do that, you're probably gonna have to fire them, because if you wait to fire them, every single month you don't fire them, they become more integral and they become more dangerous to the business. Great question, Lena. Thank you very much. Katya. Hello, Katya. Nice to have you here. Question is, I have a role map question. I don't have any employees yet, so the role map has lots of red. Is there a specific order or other factors affecting how roles should be filled with other people, or starting with the ones I hate the most? My business has two sides, one being manual therapy and the other being running an institute of 2 manual therapies. Should I create 1 or 2 role maps? In general, I have a tendency to treat these separately. Well, let's deal with the second question first. And that is that, yes, you could use either 1 or 2 role maps. Or what you might do is do 2 adjoining role maps, because what you might find, for example, is that maybe you have accounting services, that, like accounting functions, that are actually being shared between the 2 business entities. I don't know if that's the case, but if you've got quite a few shared things, then I might have 2 separate role maps that are kind of joined. In other words, there's a department head for each one and they split down, but there's one accounting department that handles both. So I might have them as departments within a bigger role map. But if they're really, truly independent, like if the institute is completely independent and it's got its own accounting and its own marketing and its own operations and stuff, then yeah, I would have 2 role maps. So that should answer your second question. To the first question, let me do that again. Is there a specific order or other factors affecting how roles should be filled with other people? Yeah, you know, that's a funny question, because there's not like a fixed formula. The first step is the homework from the last module. You should be creating a list of all the roles that you ultimately, that you want to stop doing or that other people should stop doing. And then you should prioritize them relative to urgency. So you should be taking a look, like in my case, I do not want to be shipping and receiving stuff. That's like right now, the most urgent thing for me to get out of in my business, whatever it was 20 years ago. That was the thing I wanted out of those departments, right? Then the next thing is I didn't want to do this. The next thing. So by creating that prioritization, what's really fascinating is that now I find myself keeping an eye out for those people. Remember the car? You remember how it works? The guru says you decide to buy the car and suddenly that car is everywhere. And why couldn't you see the car before? Only you could see the car before. It was everywhere, because if you couldn't see it, you would have tried to park where it was parked. What if that were true about people and opportunities? What if it was true about people, so that there are tons of people around you in the world that you meet at a networking event or that you see online or that you bump into on LinkedIn? There could be incredible people all around the world that might be able to fill some of those incredibly great roles for you. But until you have listed out those roles, until you have prioritized them, until you have defined them and chosen what order you want to get out of them, you aren't necessarily looking for the person who's the right match for that role. But once you've created that list, once you've gone bam, 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 and you go, oh God, I'm really looking for somebody, because that's what happened to me. I created my list. I'm like, I do not want to be doing my shipping and receiving. I don't want to be doing that. And immediately my first thought was, oh my God, what about Karen and Michael who sold us that dog? They keep asking us for work. He's interested in doing some manual labor. Done. I'm going to go hire him. I don't have to go hire a placement company. I didn't even have to run an ad in a newspaper. By simply identifying that I needed somebody, it suddenly activated me so that I could see the cars that were everywhere, or the people in this case. And so that's one way that I would look at prioritization. And here's the other way, Katya, and listen to me carefully. By circumstance. Isn't it entirely possible that one day, having created your prioritization, you haven't yet done 1, 2, 3, or 4, but you meet exactly the right person for category 5? You meet exactly the right person. Well, then you know what? Maybe it's time to hire that person and get yourself out of that box. You still have box 1, 2, 3, and 4 to deal with, but if you found the right person, because let's be super, super clear that among the things that are going to affect your ability to create true business freedom, I think it's safe to say that the single most important thing after your own mindset is going to be the people around you. And so if you bump into the right person that could be perfect in that given role, and it's not quite time for you to bring them on, I got to tell you, I would seriously take a look at figuring out a way to bring them on. Katya, great question. Thanks very much. Really thought-provoking. Amber, it's Amber from Vancouver, everybody. Hey, Amber, really good to see you. I hope you are well. Let's see. From everything you have said, I've realized I need to hire a project manager. How does one go about hiring one? Also, are you able to share your checklist or flow chart for taking your in-person training to video? I'd like to expand my reach and know that creating videos is my next step. All right, Amber, I will answer your second question first. No, that is my secret sauce, but it's only my secret sauce because we haven't formalized it into a product yet. We have, over the last 2 years, had a lot of clients ask us how we do it, because starting 5 years ago, when we took the Business Freedom Challenge and created a training program that was so very successful, people started saying, hey, I want to do that. And then when we did the same thing with WildFit and created all those WildFit videos, we start, and as we do more and more of it, it's a bigger question that keeps coming up. I will tell you quietly, Amber, don't tell anybody else about this, but I will tell you that we're planning on doing another broadcast like this one. We're planning on doing another broadcast like this one in August. And it's because we're launching something really, really, really special. And one of the things that we're contemplating doing, and if we do it, Amber, I'll make sure you get an invite. But one of the things that we're contemplating doing is inviting a group of people to watch the entire planning process of the product creation. Really, like to watch the whole thing, like how we create the product, how we create the syntax for the recording, to actually see how the behind the scenes of how we set the studio up, the role map of how Kelsey, when she's doing at this desk. And right now, by the way, you guys don't know this. This is pretty fascinating. But Kelsey's here with me. We're in Phoenix, Arizona. Are we in Scottsdale? We're in Phoenix. We're in Arizona. And Kelsey's here with me. But the rest of the team right now, there's a whole team, and they are in Calgary, Alberta, where they're taking your questions and they're editing them into a document, which is then being shared across the cloud and instantly updating on my screen over here. It's a complex set of things that we're doing. And so we have a lot of people that are interested in creating information marketing products. And so we're considering the idea of creating a program where you get to watch us do the entire run up to the August launch. And we expect to have thousands and thousands of people at that launch watching live. So it could be kind of fascinating. So Amber, I will make sure that if we do follow through with that plan, which I'm pretty sure we're gonna, that you get an invite to that, because I'd love to have you there. For everybody else, I know Amber quite well. She's a major WildFit client and advocate of ours and has a fantastic WildFit family. Amber, I'm looking forward to seeing you again one of these days soon. Now, let's go back to your other question. From everything you've said, I've realized I need to hire a project manager. How does one go about hiring one? Well, Amber, it's a bit of a complicated question, but what I would say to you, and this is really like, this is specific to you, Amber, and everybody else who is a fundamentally creative, optimistic entrepreneur, because that's what Amber is. She is a powerhouse of creativity. And what's really lucky for Amber compared to most creatives is she has developed one of the most important skills of a creative, and that is finishing capacity. Most creatives are always constantly starting stuff. They're like, oh, start this project, start that project, but they don't have that finishing skill. And so as a consequence, they start a million things and they don't always finish them. I know I'd be curious, how many people can relate to that? I'd love to see in the comments how many people can relate to that. I love to start stuff, finishing it, not so much. Right. Amber probably has some of that as well. I don't know, but I'm guessing Amber has some of that. We're getting a ton of yeses, by the way. So I know this. But Amber has developed at least some of the skill, I know, of the finishing capacity. And I know that because she's written books and she's completed them and she's done some really neat stuff. So Amber, what I would suggest to you in terms of hiring a project manager is your biggest thing that you need to avoid is do not go out and hire another Amber. And what I mean is don't go out and hire another creative dynamo. Don't go and hire somebody that because here's the problem. You'll meet them and you'll love them. You'll meet them and it's like, oh my God, we just spark off each other and it's so inspiring and we're going to do all this great stuff and you're going to love being around them and you're going to release all these endorphins and serotonin and oxytocin and you're going to feel fantastic and then you're going to hire them. And then you're soon going to realize you both want to do all the same things and you both don't want to do all the same things. And you both have the same measurement of time and timelines. You both have the same understanding of cost accounting and all this kind of stuff. And what you really need, Amber, probably is a detail-oriented, time-centric, quality-assured finisher. That's what you probably want as a project manager. And so what you want to do is try and find those people. And so, Amber, I'm not sure if you're familiar with our 8 paths system, but if you are, then what you're looking for is people that are really ultimately on the path of trends. You're looking for the people that are really on the path of trends, or even on the path of collection and data collection and that kind of stuff. If you really, those 2 paths are really strong. If you look at if you go and read a little bit about Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and that kind of stuff, they can give you some really neat formulas for how you find those detail-oriented, quality-centric, time-attentive people. And I think you'll find that the problem that you'll have with those people is that you find that they're a little bit dream-killy. You know, you go, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to write this and we're going to make this happen. And they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Do you know how long that's going to take? And that will be resistant for you initially, but I want you to know that that is exactly what the creative needs to have around them. So great question, Amber. Thank you so very much. And yes, I will, if we do the product launch thing that we've been talking about. By the way, I'm curious, anybody else out there that's in the information marketing world, like you want to, maybe you have books or seminars or coaching or psychotherapy or anything that you do that's kind of in that realm. I'm curious how many people would be interested in watching the whole soup to nuts of how we create one of these product launch campaigns, invite people in to watch them, how we make all that stuff happen. How many people would be interested in that? If you could just give me a rough number, it would be good. And give me the next question. All right. Would you pass a note to Andrea and let her know? I mean, we always had a suspicion about that, but I think that that could be a really neat opportunity to pass on something really exciting. Cool. Next question. Oh, no more questions? We're into the next module. Actually, yes, time-wise, we are into the next module. Okay, guys, first of all, again, I want to thank you. This is so much more fun for me than this sterile camera world. It's really fantastic. And by the way, I owe another plug. I really want to offer a plug here. I've talked pretty heavily about the power and the return involved in getting yourself a business mentor. And I really, really want you to do that. And I'm not available. I'm not trying to sell you me at all. I don't do private mentoring. I rarely do private mentoring anymore, but I really want to challenge you to go out and do that. But the other thing I want to challenge you to do is to really, really dig in and find yourself a great peer group or a really great mastermind group. And there are some really fabulous ones around the world that I know about. You know, I've been off to Glenn Ledwell's group called Flight Club. Fabulous. They do some really great stuff about internet marketing. You know, there's some really neat groups out there that you can take a look at. I know Mike Koenig's has been doing some really cool work around that. And there's just some really, really neat stuff that you can do out there in the world. And where I am right now is I'm actually at Genius Network. And Genius Network was created by Joe Polish. Many of you probably are familiar with Joe. And if you're not, go out and Google him. He's a fascinating guy. And about 6 months ago, I was having a conversation with John and Missy Butcher from Lifebook, some of you might be familiar with. And they mentioned that they had joined one of Joe's groups. And I had been kind of between mastermind groups and between coaches, and I was kind of looking for a little bit of guidance. And so I stepped up and I joined. And I got to tell you something, it really is a valuable thing. So, you know, whether you want to take a look at something like Genius Network at one day or any of these different clubs, then or create one of your own for that matter. You know, some of you live in cities that have a yes group, for example. London, Stockholm have yes groups. I think there's one in Bristol. I think there's one I think there's one in Oxford. Or if you're in the United States, there are these really great groups called power teams that are kind of inspired by the Tony Robbins world. Go out and find them. If you're interested in public speaking, for example, then I really highly recommend going out to Toastmasters. I'm not such a big fan of learning all of their content as a style of speaking, but I'm really fascinated in hanging out with other speakers and using that as a great place for practicing and masterminding about speaking. So I just thought I'd give a little bit of a plug for generally the concept of masterminds, and specifically a plug for Genius Network, because they've kindly let us come here and shoot this in their studio, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. They have an annual event, and you know what? Maybe what we can do as a favor for Joe is post the link to the annual event when it comes up in this Facebook group, so you guys can all know about the annual event that's coming up at the end of the year, and you can come and check out what Genius Network is all about. So that was my little, brought to you by our sponsor little campaign. And now we'll move into Module 5. So Module 5 is all about mini exits. I'm going to have a drink of water, and then we're going to start with Module 5. Okay. All right. Ready to go? Are you guys ready to go? I like this a lot better where it's just one camera. You know, the last time when I had to like talk to the webcam and then switch to the studio cam, it was a little weird. But anyway, this is kind of cool. All right. Welcome back. I'm Eric Edmeades, and this is Business Freedom Foundations. And now we're into Module 5. Module 5 is about how we set ourselves up to create mini exits. In other words, I'm going to teach you how to quit some of your jobs. That's what this is all about. Having created a role map and then having done the diagnostics of that role map, and that is identifying the trouble spots and then prioritizing the roles that you or others need to get out of, now we can start talking about the psychological and logistical realities of leaving some of these jobs. And this is really important. Now, the first thing is psychologically, simply prioritizing the jobs that you would like to quit can be one of the greatest gifts you ever give yourself. I'm hoping at this point you've done that homework and you will know what I'm speaking about is true. The reason that it's so powerful is that very often when people have a condition that they don't like, the human psychology tends to create that condition into a permanence. Let me describe what I'm meaning here. Have you ever had a cold or a flu that went on just a little too long? That went on just a little too long and you started to feel like life wasn't worth living? I'm not talking full-on suicidal thoughts here, but you're like, man, if I'm going to be sick like this, it's just not worth it anymore. If you've ever had a flu like that, then I want you to recognize that partly what's going on there is that humans have this weird ability to take their present and fill their timeline with it. So however I'm feeling now is likely how I'm going to feel forever. And so we do that sometimes when we're sick even. And so finally, when we get healthy, we're like, oh my God, it feels so good. But then within about a week of feeling healthy, we do the exact same thing. I feel healthy, I'm going to feel healthy forever. So I may as well eat this garbage, right? It's a fascinating thing about people. And so the same thing happens inside our business when we have a job, for example, that we don't want to do. Let's use accounting as one that I don't particularly want to have to do. It doesn't matter how good I am at it. I'm actually quite good at it. My wife, who is a chartered accountant, is always amazed at my understanding of accounting. When we first got together, she was really impressed. I understood depreciation tables, and I understood cash flow analysis, and I understood deferred income. And she was really surprised that I knew all that stuff. I knew that stuff because I believe that to be an effective business owner, you need to be able to speak the language of the business, even if you don't want to have to do the job. I don't want an MBO. I don't want an MBA. I don't want a master's in business administration. I want an MBO. I want to be a master of business ownership. That means I don't need to know how to do the accounting, but it means I need to know how it works and I need to be able to communicate about it. If you make me do it, however, I find it dreary and painful and difficult. And so as a consequence, I'll procrastinate it. And when I finally do it, I might do it rushed. Luckily, I haven't had to touch my own accounting in decades. But the point is that when I did have to do it, I felt like it was going to be forever. And as long as I felt like it was going to be forever, I hated it all the more, just like the flu. You see, if I had to sit down and do it, I'm like, oh my God, I can only see the future where I'm constantly having to do my own accounting. And the weirdest thing is, by doing the assignment that I gave you in the last module, by making a commitment to myself, by setting the goal, by being clear that one day I wouldn't have to do my accounting anymore, I suddenly found myself enjoying doing my accounting work because there was light at the end of the tunnel. So if you haven't done the assignment from the last module, I really want to push you to stop the recording right now and go and do the homework because it'll make this next section so much more powerful. No, stop it. If you haven't done the homework, stop the recording. Oh, you did? You've done the homework. Okay, good. Well, in that case, let's move on. When we take a look at our prioritized list of tasks that we want to stop doing or roles that we want to stop doing, one of the interesting things to evaluate is why you're still doing it. And I'll tell you that very often when I ask people this question, I ask them, well, why are you still doing your own accounting? Why are you still doing your own marketing? Why are you still working in your own warehouse? Why? The answer that I get at the surface is not actually the answer. It's what they think the answer is. So here's a good example. Very often people will say, well, I'm still doing it because I don't have the money. I don't have the budget to hire somebody else to do it. Oh, okay. And then what I do is I go through a little bit of a mathematical discussion with them. Now, math is not the most exciting topic in the world. Sorry, accountants, but for the rest of us. But I go through a little bit of an accounting exercise with them. And what I show them is the delta between how much they are worth when they are working in their flame, when they are really doing what they love, when they are in passion, when they are doing the maximum contribution for their business. I show them the delta of the value that they create for their business versus the cost of that task. This is a big deal. This is a really big deal because you see, every single day that you do a job that you could hire somebody else to do for less money than you're worth, you're losing money. Let me say that again differently. And I think I've given you this example, but I want to give it to you again. I found myself in a situation where I was quite clear that as long as I was sitting in my sales room and I was making sales calls, that I was generating about 100 pounds an hour in revenue for every hour I was on the phone. Sorry, 800 power. I'm going to do that again. Okay, retake. I realized that for every single hour that I was sitting in my sales room, I was generating 800 pounds of revenue every hour. So if I sat there for 2 hours, I generated 1,600 pounds of revenue. If I sat there for 8 hours, it was a much bigger number. And it was consistent. It wasn't, by the way, that in a given hour, I would produce 800 pounds of revenue, but it was averaged over the course of 20 hours. I was averaging 800 pounds an hour to make those sales calls. The reason that's an important distinction is sometimes as a salesperson, I would find it dejecting that I might do 3 or 4 or 5 hours and not generate any revenue. But it was in the 6th hour that I might generate enough revenue to average out to my 800. Now, the problem is in the warehouse, I would then take off my suit and tie, run over to the warehouse, put on some overalls so I wouldn't get too dirty, and then I'd be boxing stuff up, counting things, quality assurance, cleaning things, waiting for the delivery guy to show up. And I could hire somebody to do that for 10 or maybe even if I was super generous that day, 20 pounds an hour. And so how much am I losing every hour I do that? And I know that's a very big delta. Some of you are going, well, the delta's not that big for me. Well, I had another delta that was just like that, where I was doing my own IT management. I was managing our network. I was fixing the computers when they went down. But you know what's crazy is I had an IT manager. Now, clearly, I wasn't paying him only 10 pounds an hour. If I remember correctly, we were paying him closer to 50 or 60 pounds an hour. He was very expensive. But there was still this big delta. There was still a delta between what I was worth in sales or what I was worth as the managing director compared to what I was worth fixing the computers. And so I want you to think about that because very often people say, I don't really have the money. And what I'm saying is the reason you don't have the money is because you keep doing it. The reason that you don't have the money to hire somebody to do that job is because you keep doing the job. In my case, if I simply for 1 week saved myself 10 hours in the warehouse, then I was saving myself hundreds or thousands of pounds. And so all I had to do is bite the bullet and be willing to bring somebody in. But then we have to remember there's another psychological thing here, that when we hire people, we tend to think in annualized salaries. Oh my God, that person's going to cost me 30, 40,000 euros, dollars, whatever it is a year. No, you don't have to pay them that up front. You have to pay them weekly, or you have to pay them biweekly or monthly, whatever your company does. That's what you need to have up front. That's all. It might be nice to have 2 or 3 months of their income in the bank. It might be nice, but it's not always practical. By the way, remember my conversation before about how being an employee is not necessarily the most secure thing in the world? That's right, it isn't. They don't understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur on the other side. They don't understand that entrepreneurs often are going week by week by week, not totally sure how they're going to make payroll. They go home, they buy their groceries. They have no idea the uncertainty they're living with. But you do, and it's your job to navigate it. And so what I'm saying is that when you begin to realize that by doing that job yourself, you are literally losing money. And you're losing exactly as much money as you are worth in your highest value job versus what you could hire somebody to do that job for. It's so fascinating. So one of the exercises that you can do is to look at a job that you would like to replace and do some research. And so here comes your first homework assignment. It's to look at initially just one of the jobs that you would like to come out of, and recognize that you would like to come out of that job. And then here's the tricky part, is I'd like you to make a guess or an estimate as to how much you might be worth at your highest value in the company. If you're working in sales, it's over there. If you're managing the company, it's over there. Whatever it is, if you're a practitioner, if you're a massage therapist or a doctor or a dentist, whatever you are worth when you are doing the thing that you should be doing, and then how much you could hire somebody to do that job for, and then figure out what the difference is. And then I want you to do a really important piece of math. And that is, How expensive is that over a year? I want you to do this exercise. I want you to make a guess as to how much you are worth on an hourly basis when you are truly, truly in flow. And then I want you to figure out how much you could hire somebody to do that job for. And then I want you to figure out how expensive that is over the course of a year. That's your first homework assignment. Now, the next step is for us to take a look at psychology. It's for us to take a look at psychology because very often what's going on is that we are attached to a job for emotional reasons that we don't really fully understand. And the challenge is, if there are emotional voids in your existence as an entrepreneur, if there are emotional voids in your heart as an entrepreneur, then you will find ways to satisfy those emotional needs. And sometimes there will be jobs in your company that will give you those needs, that will help you satisfy those needs that you shouldn't be doing. And I'll give you a very, very clear personal example from my life. And that's this, that as a child, when I was 15 years old, for a number of reasons, I found myself homeless, living in Edmonton, Alberta. For those of you who are not really familiar with Canadian geography, I may as well have been in the North Pole. Now, Edmonton is a very cold place in the wintertime. In fact, it's very easy to describe to my American friends because it's -40 in the wintertime sometimes. And the reason that's easy to explain to my American friends is because -40 is the same in Celsius and Fahrenheit. It's cold. It's moisture-sucking, life-ending cold. And I was homeless in Edmonton, Alberta. And I had to figure out all kinds of different ways to make that work, you know, from couch surfing to finding warm places to sleep. It was an interesting time in my life. And one day I noticed that the guy who owned the video arcade that we all used to hang out at, he always looked really tired. Now, for those of you who understand Inception Marketing, inceptionmarketing.com, if you want to know more, you'll know that one of the first things to do is understand who your ideal target market was, the owner of the arcade. Then the next step is to understand what's important to him. Looking at him, sleep's got to be important. The guy's constantly tired. So then you go to step 3. I need to engage him. I walked up to him and I said, "Gosh, you're really looking tired." And he goes, "I am." And I go, "I'll bet that's because you're here early in the morning every day and then you're closing late at night every night. I'll bet that's why you're so tired." And he goes, "That's exactly it. And I'm not getting to spend any time with my family either," he says. And I said, "I have a solution for you." And he goes, "What's that?" And I said, "I will work for you for free." He's, "What?" And I said, "I will open the arcade for you in the morning and work the first couple hours in the morning, and I will work the last couple hours of night and close the place up for you completely for free as long as you let me sleep here at night." And he agreed. And so suddenly I wasn't so homeless anymore, and it was warm at night. But here's the challenge. If you are 15 years old and you are sleeping at night in a video arcade with 150 video games, how much sleep do you think you get? Not very much at all. You perfect the video games. You commune with the machines and become one with technology. So I was really, really good at video games. I was really, really sharp with them. And of course, if you're really, really good at video games, you begin to recognize that computers think in a certain way. And so I became really good at computers. What did that mean? It meant that I was the guy who set up our network in my company. And if somebody's computers crashed and they went down, I was the guy that they would come to ask to fix it because I was the one who set it up, of course. And worse than that, I was so good at it that I could generally fix them quickly, like really quickly. And they'd get my employees would actually get frustrated because they would sit there and try and fix it for like half an hour and they'd finally give up and call me on the intercom. I would come over, I'd look at the computer and I'd usually within 2 or 3 button clicks, I'd have the whole issue resolved for them. And they'd get frustrated by that. And you know what? I kind of liked that they got frustrated about it. It made me feel good. My ego liked it, right? Isn't it true? And so one day I'm walking through the sales room and one of the salespeople goes, "You know what, Eric? My computer is so messed up, there's no way you're going to be able to fix it this time." And I said, "All right." And I walk over and I'm looking at the screen and I go click, 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 boom, and the computer comes back and everything's fine with the computer. But what I noticed at that point was that everybody in the sales room had stopped working. They had stopped working and they were watching. And I realized that I think they'd been running a bit of a pool on would I be able to fix it or not. He had convinced them that this time it was so broken, it was not fixable. And so when I fixed it, about half of the people went, "Yeah!" And another half went, "Oh man." I swear, I think they had bets going. But you know what's funny? If I really get into the emotions of what was going on, as I walked out of the room that day, I felt really good about myself. Like, yeah, those people who like were cheering for me, well done. We got it done. We fixed it. And those that were cheering against me, I showed you. And so my ego is feeling all inflated and wonderful. I was satisfying one of my deepest needs as a human being, and that is my feeling and my need for significance. But I want you to think about that, because I have an IT manager sitting in the office. I'm paying him 50 or 60 pounds an hour, sitting in his office, and I'm over here fixing the computer because it makes me feel nice. And so I had to take a look inside, and I had to understand why it was that I needed that jolt of certainty or that jolt of significance in my life. Because that was a cheap drug way of getting it. It was a way that would hold my company back. If I keep fixing the computers, how's the IT manager ever going to get good at it? That was one of the problems, is that the guys would call me before they called the IT manager, because the IT manager might take 15 minutes to fix it, and I could usually fix it in 2 minutes. So the trouble is the IT manager is never going to learn to do it in 2 minutes if I never let him do it. And so I'm going to completely hold my business up because I'm getting some emotional jolly from fixing the computers myself. And so I had to take a deep dive and look at what was going on. And I realized that, yes, I had some issues around significance. I had gone through a really difficult divorce. My child was in another country. There was a lot of emotional emptiness in my life at that point. And so what I then had to do is create a roadmap for how to fill my emotional needs in more functional ways. Here was one of them, by the way. It was really kind of fun. I found myself about a week later walking through the sales room, and one of the salespeople goes, "Eric, it's totally messed up. You're never going to fix it this time." And I looked at him and I said, "You and I both know that I could come over there and fix it in 2 or 3 minutes. But we have an IT manager. Please pick up your phone and call the IT manager. Thanks very much." And I walked to my office feeling so proud that I had built a business so successful that I could afford to have a full-time IT manager, and I didn't need to fix the computers myself. I changed it. I rewired it so I got my significance from not fixing the computers. Does this make sense? It's really fascinating. I'll give you another example because you're going to have an assignment to do, and it's a little bit complicated. The next example is I was in Oslo in Norway, and a woman was in one of my seminars in our business freedom experience. We have a super intense, super fun, super effective 5-day business school program, and she was there. And on about day 3, she was sitting right over here, and on day 3, she goes, "Well, Eric, this sounds very good in theory, but I will never stop doing my own accounting. Never." And I said, "Okay, do you like doing it?" "No." "And you're never going to stop doing it?" "Never. Never am I going to stop doing it." "Why not?" "Well, because it's got to be done right. It's got to be on time. It's got to be done perfectly. It's on my accounts. I have to have my tax filings done correctly. I got to get the VAT report done correctly. I want my bills paid on time. I want people paying on time. I want it done properly. And if it's going to be done properly, I'm going to have to do it myself." I said, "Okay, fair enough. I understand." Now, here's what I didn't tell her. In my head, I'm doing a little quick calculation on which of her emotional needs are suffering in her life right now. And what is she trying to accomplish here? Well, think about it. One of her emotional needs, a very strong driving need for her, is clearly the need for certainty, right? You could call it control, but what she really wants is certainty. She wants certainty. And so how is she getting that certainty? By controlling everything for herself. I'm going to do it myself. It's got to be done right. So knowing that that's what's going on, I then thought, okay, how else might I be able to give her certainty? So I stopped and I said, "Okay, I hear you. But here's my question for you. What if every Friday you were to get a report, 2 sheets of paper, and on this report, it'd show you exactly how much money you have in the bank, exactly how much money people owe you over the next, 6 months, how much money you owe over the next 6 months, sales projections for the next year, and then put all that stuff together and created a cash flow forecast for you, and then showed you that all the bank reconciliations were complete and that everything was done the way it was supposed to be done. It had a checklist of everything that was done and initialed. What if you got that report every Friday? Would you still need to do your own accounts? No. From never to no, I don't do it anymore, in 30 seconds. She went from never will I stop doing my own accounts to no, I wouldn't have to do my own accounts anymore in 30 seconds. Why? Because we found another way to satisfy her emotional need. This is some of the most fascinating work I've ever found in business. And I got to tell you something, I wish that I'd understood this even better when I was in my own business, because it would never have taken me 6 years to get the business freedom. I would have been able to do it in 2, no question about it. In fact, the next time I started a business, it took me 18 months because of this one thing. This was a hugely important thing. This was a hugely important thing. And so here's your assignment. For each of the tasks, now this is a bit of a longer assignment. For each of the tasks, for each of the roles that you've prioritized to get out of, I just want you to start with the first three, but I want you to do it for all of them. But your official homework is for the first three. I want you to take a look at which emotional needs of yours might be getting met by doing these tasks. I want you to take a look and say, what am I getting from this? What is the secondary gain? I'm doing this task. What is it giving me? Right? When I was doing my own shipping and receiving, what was I getting? Immediacy. I was getting certainty. I was like, it's getting done. I'm doing it myself. I also was getting certainty cash flow wise because I felt like I was saving money every time I did it. I was wrong, but I felt like I was saving money by doing it myself. So I was getting certainty. And so I want you to take a look at least the top three, the first three, but I'd love you to do all of them. And I'd like you to identify what are the primary needs that you are meeting by doing these tasks that you ultimately wouldn't want to do if you really didn't have to. And so in order to help you with this, we're going to use the 6 human needs as Tony Robbins discusses them. And they are, first of all, the need for certainty. The need for certainty, a need for a real sense that things are predictable and things are certain around you. Another need is a need for variety, a need for a little bit of adventure, a little bit of change, a need for variety. Another need is a need for connection. A need for connection. By the way, when I used to fix people's computers for them, the other thing that happened is that I was getting a sense of connection because I got to hang out with them because my business ran so smoothly that I really didn't interact a lot with the team anymore. And so when I stopped to fix their computers, I was getting some connection, right? And then another one another really important need related to this is the need for significance. You really need to make sure that you satisfy your needs for significance, because when somebody is running low on significance, they often turn to things like bullying and ordering people around or taking on jobs that satisfy their ego, even though they shouldn't be doing the job, like fixing their computers when they've got somebody else to do it or when they should have somebody else to do it. The next two are contribution and personal growth. Those are important, but they're not as important as those first 4 relative to your internal desire for survival. These are survival needs. And if somebody is not getting these needs met in their life, they will find negative ways to meet those needs. And some of those negative ways might be roles in their company that they have no business doing. And so that's your second assignment, is to take a look minimally at your top 3 tasks, your top 3 roles, I should say, and identify which needs you might be satisfying by doing that role now. And part 2 of this is to then come up with some alternate ways to satisfy those needs. So if you find that you're doing this task because it gives you significance, how else could you create significance in your life? If you're finding you're doing this task because it gives you a sense of connection, how else can you increase connection, your sense of connection, and so on? So that is your second assignment for this module. Okay, cut for a second. Okay, so we're going to stop module 5 there. We have about 30 minutes left. We're going to stop module 5 there. And there's 2 more parts to module 5. We've done the budgetary issues and the psychological issues. And then tomorrow we're going to develop procedures, because it'll take us longer than we have today, especially if we still want to take some more questions. And then we're going to talk about generating the right reports. And then, as a little bit of a preview tomorrow, we're also going to show you an unbelievably powerful interviewing technique that will make sure that you never, ever, ever again hire nice, ineffective, expensive people. And so, because once we've shown you all this stuff, the next step is going to be, where do I find people? And we're going to talk about recruiting and how to hire the most incredible people that you want to keep forever. And so tomorrow is going to be really, really high pack value. So we'll stop module 5 there. Let's make a point that we're at procedures in module 5, and we'll pick that up again tomorrow. And then tomorrow we'll finish off module 5. We'll go on to module 6, how to hire the most incredible, how to never hire nice, ineffective people ever again. And then we'll go to the next module on leadership and Kaizen systems. So yes, good, excellent. So with that, let's go to any questions, comments, breakthroughs, anything you guys want to share at this point would be fantastic. Aliona says, I know a few Alionas. if you're Eliona, Elise's friend Eliona, which means you're also my friend Eliona, if you know what I mean, a special warm hello to you. And if you're the other Eliona, a warm hello to you as well. Question, I'm thinking about being passionate about your role in your box. I have a coaching client who is a country director, and he is not passionate about his role. He is the most senior in the company, but he loved being hands-on, involved previously, and growing with the company. How can I best support him in reviving his passion since he is pre-pension and not planning to move out of his role? Oh my God, Eliona, I so feel for him. I really feel for him, and I feel for you wanting to guide him through that. So let's see what we can do. So what we're talking about here, just to paraphrase this to see if I really understand what's going on, is Eliona's client is a country director in a company, and he has been promoted above his passion. This is a very scary thing, and I want you to think about it from an employer perspective. I'm going to help Eliona from a coaching perspective, but I want you to think about it from an employer perspective. Is that very often what happens is that you have employees that are expecting career progression. And then one day there's two different ceilings you should never break. One they call the Peter principle, and that is where you promote somebody past their skill set. That's extremely dangerous. If you promote somebody past their skill set, past their capability, then the problem is, and I've done this a few times, it's extremely expensive and very painful for everybody. The problem is that once you've promoted somebody past their core skill set, they will never take a demotion back to what they're good at. And so you're going to lose them. And so that's one pitfall. And then the other one that Eliona is describing is where you promote somebody out of their passion. And here's a really good example. You take a salesperson who's a phenomenal salesperson. They're incredibly good at sales. They love being out there with the people. And then one day you promote them because they want to be promoted, and you make them sales manager, where now they have to sit at a desk and fill out paperwork and do job interviews and do performance reviews, and they hate it. Their internal instinct said, hey, I want to be alpha. I want to progress. I want to be top dog. I want to be the sales manager. But then they get into that job and it's no longer their passion. And in fact, in that case, you've probably violated both principles, the Peter principle from a skill perspective and from the passion perspective. Very, very interesting stuff. So in this case, it sounds like this client, Eliona's client, his company has done this to him. He was involved in the growing of the business. So he's probably a little more on the creative side. He likes to be in the thick of it. And now he's been promoted to a position where he's just kind of sitting on top and watching. And it's a different thing. It's management rather than driving. And this is really difficult. In a very real sense, it's funny, if you're here in Arizona, what you'll see a lot is these self-drive cars that are driving along. They're testing them here. There's a lot of them. They're usually Volvos, and they've got this spinning thing on the disc, and they're driving around, and the cars are driving themselves around. But because they're in test phase, they've got somebody sitting in the seat, just sitting there in the seat. And in a very real sense, what's happened to this guy, if I'm understanding this from Eliona's perspective properly, is he used to be driving the car, and if a flat tire, he had to get out and pump it all up, and he would pick up hitchhikers, and he was making it all happen. And now he's just sitting in a self-drive car, and he's not so passionate about that. So Eliona, let's talk about what are a couple of things that we can do. The one thing that I would think about is, first of all, is you say he's pre-pension. The question is, how much longer is he how much longer is he pre-pension? And here's why I would ask that question. And again, things are different in different countries with different pension companies and so on. But sometimes people can negotiate themselves out with an early pension release. And the fact is, if I had a client in that situation, that would be my first thing. My first thing would be to say, is it possible? Is there a company policy? Has there ever been, even before he asks, because asking can be dangerous, right? Even before he asks about this, then what I'm suggesting is that maybe what he can do is take a look and say, has there ever been a case in the company where they've actually allowed somebody to take a discounted pension to get out now, or some kind of a pre-retirement severance package that can help out. So if that's possible, I would seriously contemplate that, because frankly, it might be time for him to move to the next business that he wants to be in, and if he's not ready for retirement, but he should find something that he's passionate about and that he loves. So that might be the first thing that I would look at. Then the second thing that I would look at is really encouraging him to have an open dialogue with the company about what other stuff that he would really like to be doing. I mean, what other stuff he would really like to be doing. In other words, saying, hey, I need an expanded role of responsibility, or I'd like to be involved in starting this new division. Like, I would actually go back and talk to the company and say, look, I can do what I'm doing now, but I just don't feel challenged by it. And I'm okay with it right now, but I feel like I want more challenge in my existence. And so, hey, are there other, is there another division that I can be involved with? Or are there some people that I could mentor? What more could I add? I want to add more value to the company. And I think I could add more value if I was doing something more like this. That might be the second thing. And here's the third thing. And this one's quite magical. And it's something that I went through. Is one day I woke up and I wasn't passionate about my business anymore. I had a company that was selling wireless networking systems and data capture equipment and stuff. And I just, I have a good head for business systems and I like logistics. And, if I walk in, like I used to like walking into somebody's warehouse and noticing the way they do stuff. And usually within an hour, I could say, well, if you did this and you did that and you did this and you put barcodes over here and RFID tags on this thing, you could save a ton of money. And I like doing that at the highest level. But what I didn't really like doing was running the company anymore. And I'd kind of arrived at this place and I wasn't yet at business freedom stage. And that's so dangerous. It's so dangerous to lose your passion before you've got the business freedom. It's really dangerous because you're so close. Like in Think and Grow Rich in Napoleon Hill's book, there's this story about, being so close to the gold and then giving up. And then somebody else comes along and reaps the benefit of all the work you've done, right? No. So I sat down with my coach at that point. And my coach said, what are you passionate about? And I said, nothing. I'm just not. I'm passionate about some of the stuff I'm doing. I'm passionate about wildlife photography. I'm passionate about mentoring other people. I love all that, but I'm just not passionate about my business anymore. And he goes, okay, but are there moments where stuff happens and it just makes you smile? I go, oh, yeah. And he goes, what are those moments? And I said, you know what? I really love hiring people. I love every time we expand and hire new people. I just love that. We live in a community that has unbelievably high unemployment, and a huge number of our employees were long-term unemployed. And so to create jobs for them just filled my heart. I love doing that. And then another area of expansion we had was where one of our competitors got bought out by another competitor and a lot of their staff got laid off. So these guys had this really cushy, great job, and suddenly they found themselves unemployed. And we managed to create employment for them in our company. And what was really great was it was so cool. It was so cool. They had a job they really loved. Then their company got bought out. So they worked for a company called Telzon. And Telzon got bought out by its biggest competitor, Symbol. And then Symbol didn't want to hire them, but still needed them. So they hired them through another subcontracting company that treated them like dirt, treated them terribly. And so we then created an opportunity for them to come and work with us and created the same family-run atmosphere that they had in their original jobs. And they loved it. And that made me smile. So every time we created jobs, it made me smile, whether it was for the long-term unemployed or it was just somebody looking for a job that they could feel really passionate about. I really loved that. And the other thing that I really loved was when our employees would come to us with personal challenges. I really loved helping them. Like, I loved, and this happened a few times, where our employees would want to go get a house for the first time. I'm talking about people who might have been long-term unemployed for 5, 6, 7 years, and suddenly now they've had a job long enough, and they've built their credit rating up, and so we could write them a letter that would say that they had a secure job, and the next thing you know, they'd have their own house. I loved that feeling. In fact, I had one member of staff come to me one day, and she says, I think I'm going to have to file personal bankruptcy. And I said, why? And she goes, well, I can't get on top of these bills. I just can't get on top of these bills. And so I sat down with her. I said, show me all your bills. And she added them all up. And I looked at how much money she owed. And it wasn't huge. It was like, maybe it was 12 or 15,000 pounds. I mean, for her, it was phenomenally huge. But me looking, I thought, it's not such a big deal. And so out of the blue, I just thought, can I just make a few phone calls here? And I just one by one called a bunch of her creditors, and I offered them 10 cents on the dollar for their debts. In each case, they took the money. And so in the end, I was able to settle her $15,000 of debts for about $2,000 pounds. And that freed her up so much. And I just love being able to do that for our staff. And at this point, you can see even now, me telling you the story now, I'm all lit up, right? Well, my coach sees me and he goes, oh. So what if you realized that your business wasn't a data capture business? What if you realized your business wasn't a wireless networking business? What if you realized that your business was a life-improving business? What if you realized that your business was about creating really fulfilling and wonderful employment for people? Done. I was done. I was back. I was passionate again. I suddenly realized that every time we were going out and selling a data capture solution that I might find bored me to complete tears, it was going to create another opportunity to hire people. And so, Eliona, the third thing might be for you to try to find what about his job he can get passionate about and shift his focus so that he can focus on the things that he is passionate about. So you got 3 possible paths there. If any of them work, I definitely want to hear about it. Let me know. Thanks very much. Oh, I like those kind of questions because they're not typical, like out of the business book question, you know, they're real. I love that. Thank you so much. Sorry? Ooh. I'll tell you what, we haven't done a winner yet today, and I feel like we should. We should have done it earlier. Here's the thing. Here's what I want to know. Who is planning? Are you guys listening? Who is planning on hiring somebody within the next 6 weeks, and you're a little nervous that you might hire somebody that you like, and what if they don't work out and you're stuck paying a salary? Is anybody out there thinking of hiring within the next 6 weeks and they're a little bit concerned about that? Yeah? No, I want you to pick one. You guys, by the way, if I were you at this point, I would attempt influence, manipulation, bribery. Try to convince Kelsey that you're the one, because we're about to help you in a big way. No actual bribery, by the way. Have you picked one? They're coming in. You should see her eyes. She's like, I can't read them all that fast. I'll give you a moment while I answer this question and you can pick one, all right? So she's going to review all your guys' submissions, keep them coming in, and then we're going to solve that problem for one of you right here, right now. Okay, Jurgita. There is one more reason in my case. What do I do if I quit doing the job, consulting or some other job? I'd feel guilty not working. As Eric said yesterday, it's not that I don't trust my team. How do I put that guilt aside? Oh, Jurgita, I wish I knew which one it was, but in either event, that is such an important thing. And I can tell you right now, if you can let go of, there's a belief you have, and if you can collapse that belief and let it go, you have an entirely different future in front of you. You have an opportunity right now to change trajectories, like to truly change your future if you're ready to let go of a belief. Here's the belief that I suspect that you have, and that is that there is a hard, fast relationship between making money and hard work. And there may be a backup belief on this, and that is that sloth and laziness are really bad things. So you've got these potential 2 beliefs that are in there for you. And so what I want to suggest to you is that the first thing is to recognize that if you stopped doing one of those jobs, that yes, for a little while, you might be lazy and you might be a little slothful. But if you really are entrepreneurial in your spirit, you will then turn your attention to something that you're passionate about. And this is a really important thing to give yourself permission to do. I don't know if you've ever heard of these like Vipassana like retreats where you go off on a retreat and you don't talk for like a week or 2 weeks, like no words, no writing. And one of the things that does for people is it gives them a fresh perspective, because the challenge is that if you're showing up for work and doing the job every single day, you only have the perspective of somebody doing the job. And it isn't until you can actually let go of that job that you can then really find out what it is that you do want to be doing with that time. At the end of the day, if you're feeling guilty, my question is, who are you feeling guilty for? Are you ripping somebody off? Is somebody getting hurt by you not doing that job? You have to remember that guilt implies there's somebody else thinking badly about you. Guilt is not just a personal thing. You know, moms who do mom guilt, right? Mom guilt is a big deal. It's a big thing. And it's something fathers don't even remotely understand, I find. But you see, the thing is, when moms have mom guilt, they're feeling guilty that they haven't done enough for their child, which in 9 times out of 10 is completely wrong. But what they're worried about is that they've hurt the child in some way, so they feel guilty. So my question is, who do you think you're hurting? That's my question for you. Who do you think you're hurting if you don't work, if you stop doing that job? I don't think you're hurting anybody, right? I think you have a perception that you might hurt somebody. So the question really has to become, what would happen if you gave yourself the freedom to really do what you wanted to do minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, week by week? And the truth is, you might not actually find that out until you do stop doing the job, right? And by the way, you can test this. And so I'll give you this little formula for testing it. Every single year that I had my first company, so my first company was my IT company in England. Every single year that I had that company, I took 12 to 14 weeks of vacation. Let that sink in for a minute. every single year that I had that company, I took 12 to 14 weeks of vacation. I like sharing that statistic because often when I'm traveling around the world speaking about business, I bump into particularly Europeans are very condescending about their American friends who only get 2 weeks of vacation every year. But you know what happens when I ask Europeans about their vacation? I ask them, do you take a cell phone with you on vacation? Yes. Do you have internet access when you're on vacation? Yes. In other words, they're taking their big fat 4 or 5 weeks of vacation, but they're not really sometimes taking a true break from what's going on. If you know anything about me at all, Jurgita, you'll know this. When I travel extreme often. I mean, I really do. I will disappear into the deepest darks of India or Africa doing wildlife photography or going to live with Bushmen in Tanzania. And you know what? You can't reach me. I'm not reachable. There is no cell phone, right? Here's why I'm sharing this with you. I took 12 to 14 weeks of vacation every year, and my friends and my mentors and the people around me are like, Eric, what the hell are you thinking? You can't do that. You'll go out of business. Why on earth are you doing that? And I go, I'm doing it because if I couldn't do it, I don't want to have a business. I got into business for freedom. I got into business for economic freedom. I got into business for personal liberty. So if I can't take that vacation time, I don't want to be in business. Interesting. But then I said, plus on top of that, when you take proper vacations, when you take a proper vacation, I'm talking minimum 10 days, no electronics, right? Minimum 10 days, no checking in with the company. You break 2 addictions. You break your addiction to the business and you break the business's addiction to you. And maybe that, Jurgita, can give you some perspective about what you would do if you stopped doing that job. Because I imagine that you would not become a lazy couch potato, that you would then turn your attention to something else you're passionate about or something else that's significant. And so I want you to really give some thought to something. Do you know people out there in the world that seem to be creating incredible magic and it seems effortless for them, that it seems like it requires no effort of any kind? If you know anybody like that, then you should be ready to let go of the belief that there's a relationship between money and hard work. And by the way, do you know other people that seem to create incredible magic in their lives, and yet they seem to be having a lot of fun too? In other words, maybe a little sloth is a healthy thing from time to time. And if you know some people like that around you, then again, maybe it's time for you to be able to let go of that belief and recognize that if you really want to sharpen the saw, if you really, really, really want to develop some real sense of purpose in your life, that sometimes what you have to do is remove the distraction of the day-to-day. Jurgita, I hope that helps. I really do. I know the trap you're talking about, and I hope you can get yourself out of it. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a winner.
Oh, we have a winner.
Yeah, Crystal Ray.
Crystal Ray, you win. Now, you don't know what you win just yet, but here's what you win. So I asked if you were going to be hiring somebody in the next, 6 weeks or so, and if you're a little bit concerned that you might not hire the right person. So we recorded a program, and the program is basically how to hire, keep, retain, train, and have forever the very, very best employees, how to never get sued by them, and how to win in case you do get sued. We created the entire program. It's a video-based training program that teaches you where to find people. It shows you exactly the script for interviewing people, which, by the way, for the rest of you who didn't win this, that part I'm actually going to give you tomorrow. That part is part of this program. It's a little bit of crossover. I'm going to show you a script for how to hire people. I showed this script to a bunch of people here from Genius Network about 3 weeks ago. We were out for dinner and they asked me about it and I shared it with them, and every single one of them was like, you've just saved me tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because most people that have been in business for any length of time know how expensive it is to hire nice and effective people. So there's a script in there that'll show you how to not do that. Then there's a really great procedure for what we call the induction process, so that you can make sure that people are brought into the business in a way that really prepares them emotionally for a long-term job and for a real sense of excitement. And then how to set up your HR systems to make sure that you truly never get sued, or that if you do get sued, you will absolutely prevail. And I'll tell you something. I was teaching this many years ago in Stockholm. I was in Stockholm teaching this principle on how to hire people and how to never get sued and how to win if you ever do get sued. And then I suddenly realized I'd made this very big fat claim. I had said, if you follow my steps, you absolutely will never get sued by your employees. Or if you do get sued by one that's foolish enough to try, you will prevail in every case as long as you follow this system. And then I suddenly realized that I had 2 judges in the room. I just suddenly realized they were sitting back there, 2 judges. And I thought, ooh, I've made this very big claim. And there are 2 judges in the room. And there are other people that know there are these judges in the room. And so I stopped. And I mean judges. I'm not talking judgers. I'm talking they sit in court and judge on stuff. And so I stopped everything. And I said, could you get them a microphone, please? I said, I really want your honest opinion. I'm hoping I have not overstated what I'm saying here, but I want your honest opinion. If they do everything I just described, if they follow every step I've just described, do you believe that anybody will ever sue them? And they both, no. And I said, but if somebody does sue them, do you think there's any chance that they will lose? No, absolutely not. And so that program, we created that program, and it's available through the Business Freedom Academy, and you have just won it completely for free. So I want you to make sure you consume that program before you do your hiring. And for the rest of you, you will get the interviewing script as part of the module that's in this program. So you will learn how to hire the best people and avoid nice, ineffective people forever. Cool? All right, next question is from Paula. I'm doing the role map and just realized something. At the beginning of the business, my business partner took up almost all the roles and now has decided to move away from the company and is requiring me to fill all his roles. However, I am not willing or capable of taking up all those roles. What should I do? Wow, Paula, this is a tough thing. Now, is your business partner like leaving the business entirely? It says moving away from the company. So I assume like fully leaving the company. So, of course, you know I have to say this, but this is why we do this exercise early on. If there are any of you, please hear me. If there are any of you who are thinking, well, I'm a solopreneur, I don't need to do this exercise yet. Listen to what Paula is telling you. By not doing it, she has a massive iceberg straight off the bow of her ship. And she hadn't known about the iceberg, and suddenly the iceberg called her and said, I'm going to hit you. And it's happening to her right now. So if any of you have not done the homework assignments in this exercise, if you're just here enjoying the fun, you know, it's like stand-up comedy around here all the time, right? No, this is practical business stuff. And if you haven't done the homework assignments, please read Paula's message. Because what some of you, if you're like me and you've got a little bit of an overactive empathy, I can actually feel the stress that this is difficult what she's talking about. And so the first thing I have to say, Paula, is get a time machine and go back and do, okay, so you can't get a time machine. But for the rest of you, to make sure you never need a time machine, do this exercise now, and please don't find yourself in the situation that Paula's in. Now, Paula, in your case, when we do the rest of the modules tomorrow, when we do like part C and part D, we did the first two, I think it's gonna give you some really powerful steps that are gonna help you to make this transition. For now, the assignments that we've given you are a really great start. You need to create a list of all the roles that he is no longer willing to do. I'm saying he, but I can't see if it was a he or she from the way you've written, but your partner doesn't want to do anymore. And I want you to create a list of those roles. And then what I want you to do is I want you to asterisk any of the roles that you feel comfortable to do for now, not forever, for now. And I want you to like double asterisk any of the roles that you don't feel comfortable to, and then triple asterisk the ones that you are terrified of, that you just can't do, that you just really, really, really shouldn't be doing. Then the next step is I want you to go have a conversation with your partner. Now, I'm going to assume that your partner has some vested interest in making sure that the transition works out well. I mean, is your partner leaving? Are they still going to own equity? I guess I don't know some of those things. But what I want you to do is go and have a sit down with your partner and say, look, as I can tell from this role map, these are the things you currently do. And I want you to try to negotiate. Oh, it's a he. I see it now, his roles. I want you to try to negotiate a time period rather than him just simply walking away. I want you to negotiate a time period and look at each of the roles and say, look, these ones here, I need you to do those for another month or 2 months or 3 months. And these ones here, I can start to take over right away. And I want you to try to negotiate a transitional change with your partner. And I hope that that'll help you a lot, Paula. And definitely, as we complete the section on mini exits tomorrow, I think that'll also give you some really good feedback and really good strategies for how to prepare yourself for hiring and contracting people to come in and do those roles for you. I'm so sorry that you're going through that, Paula. I hope that I'm able to help you, and I hope that you get through it well. Thank you. Whew. What a day. Have you guys had fun? I'm looking for some honest truth here. Has this been fun? Is this valuable for you? Here's a question I've got for you. Are you impressed that this is free? I hope so. I like that we can do stuff like this. I mean, we can't run our entire business this way, but once we started inviting people into these live workshops, I just really enjoyed a great deal. So, oh, They're just giving me the feedback. I really appreciate it. I'll read through it a little bit later too. So I just want to remind you what's going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to resume the mini exits conversation where we're talking about the logistics of you quitting a few jobs. How many of you guys want to quit your jobs? Some of them. How many people have, here's what I want to know. How many jobs do you want to quit? I want to know how many jobs people want to quit. Like most people, it works like this. They think that becoming an entrepreneur is about quitting one job and starting a business. No, being an entrepreneur means quitting one job, then starting a business, and then quitting all kinds of jobs. So how many jobs do you want to quit? I'm curious to know. Are we getting some good ones? 4, 7, all but 2, 10 or more. You see, I want you to quit your job again. And so tomorrow we'll go back through the logistics and back into the logistics of how you prepare yourself psychologically and logistically for quitting those jobs and giving yourself more and more freedom. I am telling you, there are some of you that are on this program right now that even a month from now, you will have more freedom than you did before this program because of the stuff we're going to do tomorrow. Once we've completed that section, then I'm going to show you some really interesting recruiting and hiring techniques that'll really help you to make sure that you bring the right people in. And then we're going to talk about one last really important thing, and that is having a systematic system for improving your business on a consistent basis and putting that system in place so that it's not dependent upon you, so the business will continue to improve even one day when you decide to retire or travel for 3 months or do whatever it is you want to do. Thank you guys so very much for your participation today. It's been a real honor and a treat to have you here, and I will see you tomorrow. One last thing, if you're getting value from this, and I really want you to think about this, if you're getting value from this and you know there are other people out there struggling in their businesses or thinking of starting one, please share this with them for free. Go give it to them. It's absolutely my gift. And if they miss day 1 and day 2, it's no problem, because when they register, they will get a link like you will that will give you guys access to the replays for about 48 hours after the end of the program. So please go out there and share the registration link and invite as many people as you like to come and enjoy the rest of the program tomorrow. Have a fantastic night. See you tomorrow.